Tonight, we walk into the world of Tudor royalty. Leave the modern world behind, with its instant light and effortless warmth. Step quietly, for the stone walls have ears, and the tapestries have seen 1,000 secrets. We are about to enter a world of dazzling spectacle and cold calculation, a world of public grandeur and private anxieties, where a single word could make a fortune, or cost a life. Come, let us push open the heavy oak door and step inside. The first thing that greets you is the light. Not the steady, even light of our time, but a living, breathing light from hundreds, perhaps thousands, of beeswax candles. It shimmers and dances, catching the gold thread woven into the immense tapestries that line the great hall. The light glints off polished silver, it warms the deep, rich colors of velvet gowns, and it reflects in the dark, polished wood of the high-beamed ceiling. The air is thick with the scent of that beeswax, mingled with the aroma of wood smoke from the cavernous fireplace and the distant, savory promise of roasting meats from the kitchens. You can hear the low murmur of voices, the rustle of silk, the soft clink of a goblet being set down. This is the heart of power, a room designed to awe and intimidate, to display the immense wealth and divine authority of the monarch. It is a golden cage, and everyone inside is a player in the grand performance. But let us not linger in the public gaze. The true court is found not only in the great hall, but in the spaces that connect it. Follow me, away from the warmth of the fire, into the corridors that are the arteries of this place. Here, the mood changes instantly. The candlelight struggles against a deep, profound darkness. The rich tapestries give way to cold, hard stone that sweats with a damp chill, a cold that seems to seep up through the soles of your shoes. You can feel the drafts that snake along the floor, whispering of the winter outside. The sounds are different here, too. The murmur of the court fades, replaced by the echo of our own footsteps, the distant, unseen clatter of a pot from the kitchens below, or the hushed, urgent whisper of two courtiers huddled in a dark alcove, their faces hidden in shadow. This is the reality behind the facade, a world of stone, shadow, and secrets. It is in these liminal spaces that the real business of the court is done. You are not a king or queen tonight. You will not feel the weight of the crown or the burden of absolute power. Instead, you have a far more interesting role. You are a silent observer, a shadow on the wall, someone close enough to watch everything unfold. Perhaps you are a newly arrived ward of a great noble, or a secretary to a royal counselor, or a lady-in-waiting, tasked with seeing all and saying little. Your position grants you access. You see the strained smile on a courtier's face after a royal rebuke. You hear the rustle of a secret letter being passed. You feel the tension in the room when a rival enters. Your duty is not to act, but to witness. It is from this privileged, invisible vantage point that we will explore the intricate machinery of Tudor life. Together, we will peel back the layers of gold and velvet. We will discover the immense effort and astonishing cost of the clothing worn by the nobility, the armor of status that dictated one's place in this rigid world. We will journey from the spectacle of the royal feast, with its exotic dishes and political seating arrangements, down into the sweltering, chaotic world of the kitchens below. We will uncover the rigid daily routines that governed every moment of a monarch's life, a relentless performance from dawn until dusk. And most importantly, we will look at the people. Not just the kings and queens whose names are written in the grand histories, but the ambitious nobles, the scheming ministers, the nervous servants, and the foreign ambassadors, all circling the throne like planets around the sun. We will learn that in the Tudor court, survival depended not just on your wealth or your name, but on your ability to navigate a treacherous web of loyalty, ambition, and fear. So stay close, listen carefully, and keep to the Shadows. Our journey into the heart of the Tudor court is about to begin. The world awakens not with the sun, but in a deep and profound darkness, a velvety blackness that still holds the memory of night. The first sign of life is not a sight but a sound, the distant, solemn tolling of a chapel bell, a lonely call to the first mass of the day. It is a sound that slices through the silence, marking the boundary between the deep sleep of the noble household and the first stirrings of the great machine that is the palace. In the stone corridors, far below the grand bedchambers, muffled footsteps echo. These are the servants, the invisible hands that keep the world turning. You can hear the quiet scrape of a flint against steel, a momentary, sharp scent of sulfur, and then the soft, hungry whoosh as a spark catches on tinder. A single flame is born, a tiny pinprick of orange in the overwhelming dark. This small miracle is transferred to a tallow candle, and from that candle, 100 more will be lit. The servants move like ghosts through the cold passages, their mission to deliver fire to the hearths of the palace. To begin the daily battle against the cold and the dark. In the bedchamber, you are cocooned in warmth, shielded from the chill by the heavy, embroidered curtains of a great four-poster bed. The air inside this fabric fortress is warm and thick with your own breath. The world outside it is cold, a fact you are reminded of when a chambermaid silently draws back the heavy drapes. The gray, pre-dawn light filters weakly through the leaded glass of the high window, and the chill of the room rushes in. But the servants have come prepared. They bring with them a silver ewer steaming with hot water, scented with rose or lavender. A basin is placed on a wooden stand, and the simple act of washing one's face and hands is the first luxury of the day. A moment of gentle warmth before the great and arduous task of dressing begins. Another servant will be coaxing the fire in the chamber's hearth back to life, the crackle of the kindling a welcome, cheerful sound that promises a growing circle of warmth. The day has not truly begun, but its essential foundations, fire, light, and water, are being laid by quiet, efficient hands. Now, the ritual begins. Dressing a Tudor noblewoman is not a simple matter of choosing a garment. It is a slow, methodical construction, an architectural process of building a silhouette, layer by painstaking layer. It requires the assistance of at least 2 skilled chambermaids, whose movements are practiced and intimate. The process starts with the very foundation, the only garment that will actually touch the skin, the linen smock, or chemise. Made of the finest linen the household can afford, it is soft, clean, and cool against the skin. Its primary purpose is practical, to absorb the body's sweat and oils, thereby protecting the phenomenally expensive outer garments from being soiled. This is the layer of hygiene, the one piece of the entire ensemble that will be washed with regularity. The maids pull the soft fabric over your head, its clean, slightly herbaceous scent a comfort as it settles over your shoulders, falling to your ankles. Next comes the scaffolding that will define the Tudor ideal of beauty, the stays. This is not a garment for comfort, but for structure. Made of stiffened canvas or leather, and reinforced with rigid supports of whalebone, wood, or even iron, the pair of stays is a formidable piece of engineering. The maids hold it up as you step into it or as they wrap it around your torso. The laces at the back are threaded, and then they begin to pull. You feel the familiar, unyielding pressure as the garment is tightened, compressing your waist and flattening your chest to create the stiff, conical shape that is the height of fashion. Your posture is instantly altered. You are forced to stand straighter, your shoulders back, your breathing shallower. It is restrictive, a constant physical reminder of the rigid etiquette and self-control required of a person of your station. With the torso now rigidly defined, the construction moves outward. The first of the underskirts, a wool petticoat, is settled over your hips, providing a crucial layer of warmth against the cold that radiates from the stone floors. Over this, another petticoat might be added, perhaps of a finer cloth like silk, for its luxurious feel and the rich, swishing sound it makes. The maid's hands are deft as they smooth the layers, ensuring they hang perfectly. Then comes the true architectural marvel of the age, the farthingale. This is the great hoop skirt that creates the iconic A-line silhouette, a bell shape that seems to make a noblewoman glide rather than walk. Depending on the style, it could be a Spanish farthingale, with hoops of wood or wicker graduating in size sewn into the fabric of a skirt, or a French farthingale, a great wool that sat at the hips. As the maids lower this cage-like structure over your head and settle it around your waist, you can feel the way it immediately transforms your relationship with the space around you. You are now significantly wider. You will have to navigate doorways with care, and sitting will be a practiced, deliberate maneuver. Only now can the main gown, the kirtle, be brought out. This is the primary layer of color and wealth. It might be made of deep crimson velvet that seems to drink the candlelight, or a rich damask woven with intricate floral patterns. The maids lift the heavy, opulent fabric, its sheer weight a testament to its value, and carefully lower it over the farthingale. The underskirt is often revealed through a split in the front of the kirtle, showing another layer of expensive fabric, the forepart. The bodice of the gown, stiffened and fitting tightly over the stays, is laced up the front or back. The final structural elements are the sleeves. In Tudor fashion, sleeves were often separate, modular pieces, allowing for different combinations. Today's sleeves are voluminous, slashed to reveal puffs of the fine linen from the chemise beneath, and they are tied to the shoulders of the bodice with a series of laces called points. The process is slow, each tie a small, secure knot. Finally, your hair, which has been brushed with gentle, rhythmic strokes, is braided and pinned tightly to your head, preparing it for the headdress. A jeweled hood, perhaps a gabled or French hood, is carefully positioned and pinned into place, its velvet lappets framing your face, its very structure subtly restricting your peripheral vision, forcing you to turn your head deliberately and regally. The construction is complete. You are no longer just a person, you are a living sculpture, a walking display of your family's wealth and status. The hours of painstaking construction are complete. You are now a perfect effigy of nobility, encased in layers of linen, whalebone, and velvet. But the grandeur of your appearance does not negate the humble realities of the human body. The first task upon rising from the dressing stool is a visit to the privy, a journey that is itself a small logistical challenge. The great, bell-like structure of the farthingale means you cannot simply walk, you must glide. Your hands held out slightly to feel for obstructions, your mind constantly aware of the space you now occupy. Assisted by a maid, you move out of the relative warmth of your bedchamber into the colder corridor, your silk slippers whispering over the stone floor. The privy, or garderobe, is not a room of comfort. It is a small, cold stone closet, often built into the thickness of the castle's outer wall. The air within is chilly, carrying a faint, damp smell that even the bundles of dried lavender and chamomile hanging from a hook cannot fully mask. There is no porcelain bowl, only a stone or wooden seat built over a vertical shaft that drops down the outside of the palace wall, ending in a moat or a cesspit far below. A noticeable draft rises from this opening, a ghostly breath from the outside world. Here, the magnificent illusion of your attire is momentarily punctured by practicality. With the help of your chambermaid, the great weight of your skirts and petticoats must be gathered and lifted, an awkward and cumbersome maneuver that requires trust and a complete lack of personal vanity. It is a stark reminder that beneath the jewel-encrusted facade that costs a fortune and takes hours to assemble, you are simply a person, subject to the same basic, undignified needs as the lowliest servant in the kitchens. The moment is brief, and upon returning to your chambers, the illusion of effortless grace is swiftly restored. With physical necessities attended to, the next duty is to the soul. For the Tudor courtier, piety was both a genuine spiritual need and a required public performance. Every person of standing would have a personal book of hours, a precious, handwritten manuscript that was one of their most valuable possessions. You move to your prie-dieu, a small, carved wooden kneeler in a quiet corner of the room, perhaps near the window where the morning light is now gathering strength. Kneeling is a deliberate act, the layers of your skirt settling around you like a great bell. Your maid places the book into your hands. Its leather cover is cool to the touch, perhaps decorated with gold leaf or even small gemstones. Opening it reveals a world of breathtaking artistry. Each page is a sheet of fine vellum, covered in meticulous, handwritten Latin script. The margins are a riot of color, decorated with intricate vines, flowers, and insects painted in brilliant blues, reds, and greens. A large, illuminated initial, burnished with real gold leaf, catches the morning light and seems to glow with an inner fire. This is not a book to be read quickly. It is an object for slow, reverent contemplation. Your fingers, tracing the familiar words of the Pater Noster or the Ave Maria, move over the page as you recite the morning prayers in a low murmur. This daily ritual is a vital anchor. In a world of dizzying political change, where fortunes could be made or lost in an instant, the unchanging liturgy of the Church provided a sense of order, stability, and divine oversight. It was a private moment to fortify the spirit, to ask for guidance and protection before stepping out into the treacherous waters of court life. The quiet recitation, the beauty of the manuscript, the solitude of the moment, all combine to create a pocket of peace, a spiritual armoring that is just as important as the physical armor of your stays and gown. Now, the private preparations are complete. The final, and most crucial, part of the morning ritual is about to begin. Presenting yourself to the monarch. This is the central purpose of your elaborate dress, your careful prayers, your very existence at court. You must be seen, and you must be seen in the right way. You leave your chambers and step into the main artery of the palace, joining the slow procession of other courtiers making their way towards the presence chamber. And it is here, in the hallway, that the true scent of the year 1535 greets you. It is a complex and powerful tapestry of smells. There is the clean, sharp scent of beeswax from the polished floors and burning candles. This is overlaid with the cloying sweetness of rose water and other heavy perfumes, which the nobility use liberally to mask the unavoidable reality of body odor in an age of infrequent bathing. Woven into this is the faint, greasy smell of sweat from the sheer number of bodies crushed into the space, and the savory aroma of roasting meat and baking bread drifting up from the great kitchens. Underlying it all is the damp, earthy smell of the rushes that cover the floor, rushes that, despite being strewn with sweet-smelling herbs, hide the detritus of days past, spilled wine, discarded food, and the waste of pet dogs. The atmosphere in the presence chamber is thick with anticipation. The room is a crush of velvet, silk, and jewels, a sea of powerful and ambitious people, all vying for position, all desperate for a flicker of royal attention. The air hums with whispered conversations, strategic greetings, and silent assessments of rivals' clothing and companions. Then a hush falls. The doors to the royal apartments open, and the monarch enters. A collective rustle of fabric fills the room as every person sinks into a deep, practiced bow or curtsy. For you, this is the culmination of your morning's work. You bend your knees, sinking low, your back straight as your stays demand, your head bowed. The immense weight of your gown and the constriction of your bodice make this a physically demanding posture to hold. From this low vantage point, your world is the floor, the dusty rushes, the jewel-encrusted shoes of the people in front of you. Time seems to slow. You wait, every muscle tense. The monarch passes. As the royal presence moves by, you rise. Slowly, gracefully, your eyes lifted just enough to try and meet the sovereign's gaze. This is the moment that defines the day. A slight nod of acknowledgement, a brief glance in your direction, a faint smile, any of these is a resounding victory. It means you are seen, you are recognized, you are secure in your position for another day. The relief is a palpable, physical sensation, a release of tension that you hadn't even realized you were holding. To be ignored is a cause for anxiety. To receive a frown or a cold stare is a disaster, a sign of disfavor that will be noted by everyone in the room, weakening your position and emboldening your rivals. But today, a nod was granted. The performance was a success. The morning is complete. You have successfully navigated the private rituals and the public pressures, and can now take your place among the other ladies, a perfect, glittering ornament in the magnificent, dangerous world of the Tudor court. The morning's formal duties are complete. You have presented yourself to the sovereign and received the silent nod of acknowledgement that affirms your place in this glittering world for another day. Now, a different kind of ritual begins, one of sustenance and information. The midday dinner, a grand, theatrical affair of multiple courses, is still hours away. To break the fast that has lasted since the previous evening, the court partakes in a simple, practical meal. You make your way from the crowded presence chamber to the great hall, but the space you enter now bears little resemblance to the magnificent, firelit stage it will become later in the day. At this early hour, the hall is a vast, cavernous, and chilly space, steeped in shadow and quiet anticipation. The great tapestries, depicting heroic hunts and biblical allegories, seem to absorb the weak morning light, their vibrant colors muted and somber. The long, heavy trestle tables that will later groan under the weight of the feast are not yet fully laid out. Some are bare, their dark wood gleaming faintly, while others have been draped with linen cloths, pristine white islands in the gloom. The air, which will later be thick with the smells of roasted meat, wine, and perfume, is now thin and cool, carrying the scent of cold stone, beeswax, and the faintest hint of yesterday's wood smoke. In the colossal fireplace, a servant tends to a new fire. It is not the roaring inferno of the evening, but a small, hesitant blaze, its flames still struggling to establish themselves against a mountain of fresh logs. The light it casts is meager, a flickering orange glow that does little to warm the immense space, serving more as a focal point, a promise of the warmth and conviviality to come. High above, the thin, gray light of the dawn filters through the stained glass windows, illuminating the motes of dust that dance in the still air, a silent, swirling cosmos in the quiet hall. You take your designated place at the table, a position dictated by the same rigid hierarchy that governs every aspect of court life. There are no elaborate table settings, no parade of servants presenting complex dishes. The Tudor breakfast, for all but the monarch themselves, is an exercise in functional simplicity. A page brings you a pewter plate, a knife, and a tankard. Soon after, the food arrives. It is a meal built from the staples of preservation and baking. First, there is bread. Depending on your rank, you might receive manchet, the finest white bread available, made from meticulously sifted wheat flour. Its crust is crisp, its crumb dense and white, a sign of purity and status. You break off a piece, its texture substantial, its flavor clean and wholesome. Lower-ranking courtiers might receive Che 8, a coarser whole wheat bread, darker and heavier, but no less vital. This bread is the foundation of the meal, a solid, dependable source of energy for the long day ahead. With the bread comes a thick slice of hard cheese. This is not a soft, delicate cheese, but a firm, aged product, its color a deep yellow, its texture crumbly. The flavor is sharp, salty, and powerful, a result of the aging process. Designed to preserve the milk's nutrients for months. It is a practical food, rich in fat and protein. Alongside it, you might be served a few slices of cold meat, likely leftovers from the previous day's feast, preserved by the chill of the larder. It could be a sliver of salted beef, a piece of roasted capon, or a strip of rich, gamey venison. The flavors are strong, a direct result of the salting and curing processes that were essential for keeping meat edible. To wash it all down, there is no water, which was often considered unsafe, nor the fine wines that would be served at dinner. The breakfast drink is ale. It is a small beer, a low-alcohol brew that is thick, cloudy, and nutritious. Served cool in a pewter tankard, its yeasty, slightly sweet flavor is a familiar comfort, a source of calories and hydration that has been a staple of the English diet for centuries. This meal is not about pleasure, it is about refueling the body. It is a quiet, almost meditative act, a moment of personal replenishment before the public performances of the day begin in earnest. As you eat, a new layer of sound begins to drift through the great hall, weaving itself into the quiet atmosphere. From a minstrel's gallery high above, or perhaps from an adjoining chamber, come the hesitant, exploratory notes of musicians beginning their daily practice. You might hear the gentle, melancholic plucking of a lute, as a musician works through a complex new ballad, the notes stopping and starting as he corrects his fingering. The low, resonant sigh of a viol follows, a single, long note drawn out with a bow, testing its tone in the cool morning air. A singer might softly hum a melody, their voice a quiet thread of sound, saving their full power for the evening's entertainment. This is not a performance for an audience, it is a rehearsal, the private work of artisans honing their craft. The fragmented, drifting music adds a layer of poignant beauty to the scene, a reminder that even in this world of power and politics, there is space for art. It is the sound of the court tuning its instruments, preparing for the grand symphony of the day. This time is precious for another reason. The breakfast table is the first and best opportunity of the day to gather information, to gauge the political climate, and to understand the subtle shifts in power that are the lifeblood of the court. The talk is never loud or boisterous, it is conducted in low, guarded tones, a web of whispers and meaningful glances. Here, you are not just an observer, you are a student of survival, and the words spoken around you are your most important lesson. A clerk might quietly read a dispatch that has just arrived from the continent. You lean in slightly to hear the news from France. Perhaps King Francis I is suffering from an ailment, or there is talk of a new alliance being forged between the French court and the Holy Roman Emperor, news that would have immediate and profound implications for England. The conversation is laced with speculation, as the courtiers around you try to decipher the true meaning behind the diplomatic pleasantries. Then, the topic shifts, the voices dropping even lower, to the most dangerous and consuming issue of the age. Religion. The tremors of the Reformation are felt daily. You might hear whispers of a new edict from Thomas Cromwell, the king's chief minister, concerning the closure of another small monastery in a distant shire. Someone might mention the controversy over the New English translation of the Bible, a book that is simultaneously a symbol of the new religious independence and a source of deep theological conflict. To speak too freely on these matters is to risk everything. A single misplaced word, an opinion that aligns with the wrong faction, could lead to accusations of heresy or treason. So you listen, noting who speaks in favor of the old ways and who champions the new, filing away the information, mapping the ever-shifting landscape of faith and power. The most personal talk is often the most political. Quiet gossip is exchanged about a new courtship between the children of two powerful noble families. This is not idle chatter about love, it is an analysis of a strategic merger, a consolidation of land, titles, and influence that could upset the balance of power at court. You learn who is in the king's favor today, who has been granted a private audience, and who was seen leaving the queen's chambers. This quiet breakfast is a marketplace of intelligence, and the currency exchanged, rumor, fact, and speculation, is far more valuable than the food on your plate. It is the knowledge that will allow you to navigate the treacherous currents of the day ahead. As the last of the nobility finish their quiet, strategic meal, the atmosphere in the great hall begins a slow but profound transformation. The intimate, hushed quietude of the dawn gives way to the first notes of industrious, purposeful noise. The servants, who had moved like shadows before, now enter with a new energy. Their movements are no longer just about lighting a fire or placing a tankard, but about the grand construction of the day's main event, the midday dinner. This is the moment when the hall truly begins to awaken, shedding its somber, empty character and preparing to become the magnificent stage for the Tudor court's most important performance. The first to arrive are the yeomen of the household, strong men whose task it is to assemble the very foundations of the feast. They carry in the heavy wooden trestles, their legs scraping loudly against the stone floor as they are positioned in long, precise rows. The sound is harsh and solid, a percussive announcement that the time for quiet contemplation is over. Following the trestles come the tabletops themselves, immense, heavy boards of oak, polished smooth from generations of use. It takes two men to carry each one, and they are placed atop the trestles with a resounding thump that echoes up to the high, vaulted ceiling. A series of these sounds create a rhythm of assembly, and within the hour, the empty hall is filled with long, imposing tables, a skeletal framework waiting to be fleshed out. The most important area, the raised dais at the head of the hall, receives special attention. This is where the monarch and the highest-ranking guests will sit. Here, the servants lay down not just one, but multiple layers of the finest, whitest linen tablecloths, their edges hanging almost to the floor. An usher, with immense care, places the great ceremonial salt cellar on the high table. This is no mere shaker, but a massive, ornate sculpture of silver or silver gilt, a powerful symbol of status and wealth that physically marks the division between the highborn and everyone else. Polished pewter and silver plates are arranged, each one reflecting the growing light from the high windows, creating points of brilliance in the vast room. The stage is being set, and every object, every placement, is a carefully calculated part of the theater of power. But where does the substance of this performance, the feast itself, come from? To understand that, we must leave the ordered grandeur of the great hall and embark on a journey into the fiery, chaotic heart of the palace. We follow the growing sounds and smells, moving away from the world of the courtier and into the domain of the servant. The corridors become narrower, the stone rougher, the air warmer and thick with a complex mix of aromas. We pass the buttery, where barrels of ale and wine are being tapped, and the pantry, where loaves of bread are being counted and sliced. The noise level rises with every step, the low murmur of the hall replaced by distant shouting and a percussive clanging. The heat intensifies, and the air becomes heavy with smoke. We have arrived at the great kitchen. To step inside a Tudor royal kitchen is to step into an inferno, a cavernous, stone-vaulted chamber that feels like a vision of another world. The sheer scale is overwhelming. The room is vast, dark with the soot of countless fires, and searingly hot. The air is thick enough to taste, a mixture of wood smoke, roasting meat, boiling vegetables, fragrant spices, and human sweat. The noise is a deafening, relentless symphony of industry. The sharp, rhythmic chop 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 from the butcher's blocks, the angry sizzle of fat dripping into open flames, the metallic clang of copper pots and iron pans, and above it all, the constant shouting of the master cook, his voice hoarse as he directs his small army of workers. This is not a place of culinary artistry in the modern sense, it is a heavy industrial site, a food factory dedicated to producing a spectacle of overwhelming abundance. The most dominant features of this fiery world are the fireplaces. There are several, each one a cavernous opening in the stone wall, large enough for a grown man to stand inside. In these hearths, fires roar with terrifying intensity, consuming logs at an astonishing rate. In front of these blazes stand the lowest members of the kitchen hierarchy, the turnspits, or spit boys. Theirs is a miserable and vital task. They sit on low stools, their faces flushed red from the searing heat, and for hours on end, they manually turn the long iron spits on which the day's meats are roasting. They are positioned as far from the flames as possible, but the heat is still immense, and they often use a piece of wood to shield their faces. Their movements are slow, steady, and hypnotic, ensuring that the great joints of beef, the whole deer, and the trussed-up pigs cook evenly, their skins crisping to perfection. The sheer quantity of meat is staggering. On one spit, a whole venison carcass turns slowly, its fat dripping and hissing into a long pan below. On another, a dozen capons are skewered in a row. A separate area is dedicated to the subtleties of the feast. Here, swans and peacocks, after being cooked, will be meticulously redressed in their own feathers, their necks propped up, to be presented at the table as if they were still alive, a display designed to elicit gasps of wonder from the diners. At the chopping blocks, scullions work tirelessly, their knives a blur as they dice mountains of onions, leeks, and herbs. In another corner, a team is dedicated to pounding ingredients in large mortars and pestles. They might be grinding almonds to make a creamy milk substitute, or pulverizing spices. The spice chest is the kitchen's treasure chest, kept under lock and key and managed by a dedicated clerk. Spices like black pepper, cloves, mace, ginger, and the most precious of all, saffron, were astronomically expensive. Imported from the far corners of the known world. Their use in a dish was a direct statement of the host's wealth. The clerk measures out the precious powders with the care of an apothecary. The air in this corner of the kitchen is fragrant and exotic, a stark contrast to the heavy smell of roasting fat elsewhere. These spices will be used to create the complex, heavily seasoned sauces that were the hallmark of Tudor cuisine, sauces designed to disguise the flavor of meat that was not always perfectly fresh, and to impress the palates of the sophisticated diners. As the morning wears on and midday approaches, the frantic, chaotic energy of the kitchen reaches its crescendo. The master cook, a figure of immense authority in his domain, moves through the smoke and steam, tasting sauces, prodding meats, and bellowing orders. The first dishes are ready. The roasted peacock, now beautifully refeathered, is placed on a massive silver platter. A great pie, its crust decorated with intricate pastry sculptures, is lifted from the bakehouse ovens. A tower of jellies, shimmering in the firelight, is carefully steadied. A procession begins to form. Near the kitchen door, a line of servants, each one holding a magnificent, steaming platter. A steward with a rod of Office organizes them, ensuring that the dishes will be presented at the Great Hall in the correct, dramatic sequence. The journey from this hot, noisy, sweaty, and chaotic world of creation is about to begin. The feast, born of fire and immense labor, is ready to be presented to the court, who will receive it in their cool, ordered world, as if it had simply appeared by magic. The sun, now climbing high in the sky, has banished the last of the morning's chill. The midday dinner, a grand and lengthy affair, has concluded, and the great rhythm of the court now pulses to the beat of a single heart, that of the king. Every person within the palace walls, from the most powerful duke to the lowliest scullery maid, finds their day shaped and dictated by the monarch's routine. His schedule is the scaffold upon which the day is built, his mood is the weather that everyone must endure or enjoy. To survive and thrive in this world is to understand this rhythm, to anticipate the monarch's desires, and to orbit this central sun with grace, precision, and an unwavering awareness of one's own precarious position. The afternoon is the time for the business of the realm and the strategic dance of the courtier, a period when fortunes can be made or unmade in the space between a royal decree and a well-timed compliment. Following the midday meal, the king often retreats from the public spectacle of the great hall to the comparative privacy of his council chamber. This is where the true work of governance is done. As a silent observer, you might find yourself standing guard in the antechamber, the heavy oak door closed, muffling the voices of the powerful men within. Through the door, you can hear the low, serious murmur of conversation, punctuated by the authoritative tone of the king or the sharp, precise arguments of his chief minister. The men inside are the king's privy council, a select group of the most influential nobles and cleverest administrators in the kingdom. They are seated around a heavy table, their faces grim and focused, their dark velvet doublets absorbing the light from the tall windows. A clerk sits at the end of the table, his head bowed, the only sound from his quarter the furious, scratching whisper of his quill as he records the proceedings for the royal archives. The topics they discuss are the very pillars of the state. You might glean from the conversation that they are debating a new and unpopular tax required to fund a foreign war, weighing the crown's need for revenue against the risk of public unrest. They could be analyzing a dispatch from the ambassador in Spain, trying to read between the lines of diplomatic flattery to discern the true intentions of a rival king. Perhaps a petition is being read from the merchants of London, pleading for new trade protections, or more grimly, the council could be reviewing the evidence in a case of high treason against a once powerful noble. In these meetings, the king's character is laid bare. He might be sharp and engaged, interjecting with pointed questions, his grasp of policy absolute. Or he might be bored and impatient, his fingers drumming on the table, eager to be done with the dull business of statecraft and move on to more pleasurable pursuits. The mood of the monarch dictates the outcome, and a decision made in a moment of royal pique could change the lives of thousands. While this inner circle deliberates, the antechamber becomes a theater of its own, a crowded, anxious space where the rest of the court must wait and watch. This is the heart of the courtier's game, and here, idleness is a fatal sin. 2. Stay in favor, one must master the three essential arts: observation, flattery, and the ability to blend in. You watch as men and women of high birth stand for hours, their primary occupation being to see who is admitted to the council chamber and, more importantly, to read the expressions on their faces when they emerge. A minister exiting with a satisfied smile means his advice was taken. A duke leaving with a thunderous scowl means his petition was denied. This is vital intelligence, traded in hushed whispers. Flattery is the currency of the court, and it is applied with surgical precision. You witness a young nobleman complimenting the aging Lord Chancellor on the unwavering wisdom of a recent judgment. You see a lady praising The queen's favorite on the exquisite taste of her French hood, a compliment that is really an acknowledgement of her influence. The flattery must be elegant, never clumsy or overt. The goal is to be noticed by the powerful, to be seen as a pleasant, intelligent, and supportive presence. But to be too noticeable is to be a threat. The art of blending in is perhaps the most difficult of all. It means dressing magnificently but not so magnificently that you outshine a royal favorite. It means speaking wittily but never so wittily that you seem to be mocking your superiors. It is a constant, exhausting performance of calculated humility and ambitious grace. After hours of intense meetings and political maneuvering, the king will often crave a release, a physical and visceral escape from the claustrophobic confines of the court. This is the time for the hunt. A horn blast from the courtyard signals the change in the day's rhythm. The atmosphere of quiet, tense politicking evaporates, replaced by a surge of energetic, masculine excitement. The low murmur of the antechamber is drowned out by the frantic barking of the hounds in the kennels and the clatter of horses' hooves on the cobblestones. The king emerges, his serious counsel demeanor replaced by a look of animated anticipation. He is no longer just a statesman, he is a warrior, a predator. Courtiers rush to change from their heavy velvets into more practical, though no less fine, hunting attire of leather and sturdy wool. For the young, athletic nobleman, the hunt is a golden opportunity. It is a chance to display skill in horsemanship and courage in the chase, to ride close to the king and share in the thrill, a moment to forge a bond of camaraderie that is impossible to achieve in the formal settings of the court. As the magnificent cavalcade streams out of the palace gates, a riot of color, sound, and energy, a palpable sense of quiet descends upon the palace. They leave behind. With the king and a great number of the male courtiers gone, the great machine of the palace slows. For the noble ladies of the court, this is often a time for their own, quieter routines. Their world is centered around the queen's chambers, a suite of rooms that is its own self-contained court. Here, in the afternoon light, you would find the queen and her ladies-in-waiting engaged in the primary occupation of the high-born woman, needlework. This is not the mending of simple garments. Before them might be a massive embroidery frame, upon which a great tapestry is slowly taking shape. Their needles, armed with fine silk threads of 100 different colors, move with practiced delicate precision, creating intricate scenes of myth or history. Others might be working on smaller, more personal items, a finely embroidered shirt for their husband or father, or a decorative cover for a prayer book. This relentless focus on embroidery was more than a mere hobby. It was a demonstration of the feminine virtues of patience, diligence, and artistic skill. It kept idle hands busy and prevented the kind of gossip that the court so feared. Though in truth, the conversations that took place over the embroidery frames were every bit as political and strategic as those in the king's antechamber. Alliances were formed, marriages were discussed, and reputations were quietly dissected, all while the needles continued their steady, rhythmic dance. Alongside the needlework, other quiet accomplishments were practiced. A lady might be seated by the window, reading from a book of romantic poetry or a translated classical text. Another, in a corner of the room, might be seated at a small harpsichord or a set of virginals, her fingers moving softly over the keys, practicing a new piece of music. These skills were essential components of their education, designed to make them pleasing companions and worthy wives for powerful men. But the most fundamental role for these ladies was simply their presence. They were the queen's retinue, a constellation of beautiful, well-dressed, and virtuous women who existed to amplify her own status and the majesty of the court. Their day was a quieter performance than the men's, but a performance nonetheless, one of grace, accomplishment, and unwavering loyalty to their queen. From the relative quiet of the ladies' chambers, you might find yourself drawn to one of the high, diamond-paned windows, a portal looking out onto the other worlds contained within the palace walls. With the king and his hunting party gone, a different kind of energy settles over the grounds. Looking down into the main courtyard, you witness a scene of disciplined, youthful energy, a stark contrast to the serene, indoor world of silk threads and whispered poetry. This is the training ground, the forge where the next generation of Tudor gentlemen and warriors is hammered into shape. It is a world of noise, sweat, and the harsh lessons of martial prowess. The youngest boys, the pages, are barely more than children, some as young as 7 years old. They have been sent from their own noble families to be raised in this great household, learning the complex rules of service and society. Their training at this age is less about combat and more about conduct. You see a stern master-at-arms drilling them on the art of serving at table, teaching them how to present a dish to a lord without spilling a drop, how to pour wine, and how to carve meat with precision. They learn to bow correctly, to carry messages with speed and discretion, and to hold their tongues in the presence of their superiors. They are also given their first taste of horsemanship, learning to ride on small ponies in a dedicated corner of the yard. They practice with small, wooden swords, their mock battles clumsy but earnest, their high-pitched shouts a stark contrast to the deadly silence of a real duel. They are learning the language of the court, a language of deference and duty that is as vital to their future as any skill with a blade. Further across the courtyard are the older boys, the squires, who have graduated from these basic duties and are now apprenticed to knights and great nobles. Their training is intensely physical and far more dangerous. The air here rings with the clang of steel on steel. You watch 2 squires in their mid-teens, wearing protective leather jerkins, practicing their sword and buckler drills. Their movements are becoming more fluid, their footwork more assured, but their master, a grizzled veteran with a network of scars on his arms, circles them like a wolf, his voice a sharp bark of criticism for every missed parry or sloppy thrust. This is not the elegant, nimble fencing of later centuries, it is a practical, brutal school of combat, designed for the battlefield. The swords are heavy, and the small, round buckler shields require immense strength and timing to be used effectively. In another part of the yard, a group of squires takes turns charging a quinton on horseback. The quinton is a sturdy post with a pivoting cross arm. On one side of the arm is a shield-like target, and on the other, a swinging weight, often a sandbag. A squire gallops towards it, lance couched, aiming for the center of the shield. A perfect hit causes the arm to spin harmlessly out of the way. A poor or off-center strike, however, causes the weighted bag to swing around with surprising speed and smack the unskillful rider squarely in the back, much to the amusement of his peers. It is a harsh but effective teacher of accuracy and horsemanship. Near the outer walls, others practice at the archery butts. You see them drawing the great English longbows, their bodies straining with the effort, their focus absolute. You hear the sharp hiss of the arrows as they are loosed, followed moments later by the satisfying, solid thud as they strike the straw targets. This constant training is the foundation of the Tudor state's military might, but it is also a social process. These boys are forging bonds of rivalry and friendship, learning the codes of honor and competition that will govern their lives as the future leaders of the realm. Turning your gaze from the noisy, energetic courtyard to the other side of the palace, you are presented with a world of perfect, silent, and ordered beauty, the royal garden. The contrast is absolute. If the courtyard is a world of chaotic, masculine energy, the garden is a world of controlled, feminine grace and intellectual design. It is nature not in its wild state, but nature utterly tamed, subjugated, and rearranged to suit human ideals of order and beauty. From your high window, you can appreciate the magnificent geometry of the entire layout. The garden is divided into a series of squares and rectangles by meticulously maintained gravel paths, as straight and true as if drawn with a ruler. Within these sections are the famous knot gardens, a living embodiment of the Tudor love for intricate patterns. Low hedges of aromatic herbs, the deep green of rosemary, the silvery gray of lavender, the bright green of thyme, are planted in complex, interwoven patterns that mimic the threads of a knot or the strapwork on a decorative ceiling. The effect is that of a rich, three-dimensional tapestry laid upon the earth. Walking through these paths would be to immerse oneself in a cloud of fragrance, a sensory delight reserved for the highest nobility. In the center of the main knot, a fountain might stand, a marvel of engineering and artistry. It could be a simple stone basin or an elaborate bronze sculpture of a mythological beast, water spouting from its mouth in a gentle, splashing arc. The sound of the fountain is a soft, controlled music, a stark contrast to the clang of steel from the courtyard. It is the sound of water, not flowing freely, but performing exactly as its human masters have decreed. Scattered throughout the garden are further testaments to humanity's dominion over nature, the topiary. Yew trees and boxwood shrubs are clipped and trained with relentless patience into fantastical shapes that defy their natural forms. You see perfect cones, spheres, and pyramids standing like green sentinels. More elaborate shapes catch your eye, a proud lion, the symbol of England, a soaring griffin from a family crest, perhaps a hunting dog forever frozen in the act of pointing. These green sculptures are a form of living magic, a demonstration that the will of the gardener, and by extension the king, is powerful enough to bend the very shape of living things to its own design. The garden is a peaceful retreat, a place for quiet walks and private conversations, but it is also a powerful political statement. It is a microcosm of the Tudor worldview. In an age of religious turmoil and political uncertainty, the garden represented a perfect, ordered, and controllable world. It was a symbol of the monarch's power to impose structure on chaos, to cultivate beauty, and to tame the wildness of the world, just as he sought to tame the wildness in the hearts of his subjects. You look back and forth between the two scenes below. On one side, the courtyard, where young men are being trained in the raw, physical arts of power and war, their energy chaotic but directed. On the other, the garden, a space where nature itself has been brought to heel, its energy perfectly channeled into patterns of human invention. These two views, the training of men and the taming of nature, are the twin pillars upon which the Tudor monarchy rests, martial strength and absolute control. As the afternoon sun begins to lower in the sky, casting long shadows across both the dueling squires and the manicured lawns, you know the hunting party will soon return. The quiet interlude is ending, and the palace will once again fill with the energy and ambition of the full court, preparing for the evening's entertainments. But this quiet moment of observation from the window has revealed more about the foundations of this world than any conversation in the presence chamber. In the glittering, treacherous world of the Tudor court, clothing was never just clothing. It was a language, a weapon, and a shield. It was the most immediate and powerful way to communicate one's status, wealth, ambition, and allegiance without speaking a single word. Comfort, practicality, and personal taste were distant, secondary considerations, utterly subservient to the primary function of dress, to create an imposing, magnificent, and legible statement of one's place in the rigid social hierarchy. The iconic Tudor silhouette, broad and powerful for men, wide and conical for women, was a deliberate architectural choice, designed to make the human form larger than life, to project an aura of power and unshakable presence. Every layer, from the hidden linen chemise to the Jewel-encrusted outer robe was a carefully chosen element in a daily performance. To dress for court was to arm oneself for a battle of perception, where the texture of your velvet or the quality of your fur could determine your social survival. This visual language of status was not left to chance or interpretation, it was enshrined in law. The Tudor monarchs, particularly Henry VIII and later his daughter Elizabeth I, enacted a series of deeply detailed and stringent regulations, known as the Acts of Apparel, or sumptuary laws. The official purpose of these laws was to maintain the God-given social order and prevent extravagance, but their true function was to act as a great social divider, to make the hierarchy of the kingdom instantly visible, and to stop the newly wealthy merchant classes from daring to imitate the appearance of the landed aristocracy. These laws were a legal fortress built to protect the visual exclusivity of the nobility. They dictated who could wear what, creating a complex and legally binding code of fabrics, furs, and colors. To break these laws was not merely a fashion faux pas, it was a criminal act, punishable by fines or even the forfeiture of the offending garment. The restrictions were incredibly specific. At the absolute pinnacle of this sartorial pyramid was the color purple, a dye so astronomically expensive to produce that its use was reserved for the king, the queen, and their immediate royal kin. The same was true of cloth of gold, a breathtakingly luxurious fabric where threads of real gold were woven into a silk warp. To see someone dressed in cloth of gold was to see a living embodiment of the royal treasury, a walking statement of near-divine status. The richest colors, like crimson and scarlet, were also heavily restricted. Velvet of a deep crimson hue was permitted only for the highest ranks of the nobility, dukes, marquises, and earls. A lesser knight or a gentleman who dared to wear such a garment would be making a dangerously presumptuous claim about his own importance. The hierarchy of fur was just as rigid. The cool, white pelts of ermine, with their distinctive black-tipped tails, and the deep, dark, and exquisitely soft fur of the sable, imported at immense cost from the distant forests of Russia, were the exclusive preserve of royalty and the peerage. A powerful duke might line his ceremonial robes with sable, but a mere baron would have to be content with the fur of a fox or a beaver. The lower classes, if they could afford fur at all, were restricted to the skins of rabbit, lamb, or cat. Even the use of fine silk fabrics like satin, damask, and brocade was regulated by one's income and social standing. Getting dressed in the morning was therefore an act of legal navigation. A man had to know his precise station and its corresponding material allowances, lest his choice of doublet be interpreted as an act of social rebellion. At the center of this universe of fabric and law stood the king himself. His wardrobe was a political tool, a dazzling display of the wealth, power, and magnificence of the English crown. To witness the king dressing for a feast or a formal reception was to witness the assembling of a masterpiece of conspicuous consumption. Imagine a doublet. The primary upper body garment, crafted not from mere wool or linen, but from cloth of gold, its surface shimmering and catching the candlelight with every movement. The fabric itself would be heavy, the metallic threads giving it a substantial, almost armored feel. Over this, the king might wear a jerkin of purple velvet, the color of majesty, its surface so deep and rich it seemed to swallow the light. His sleeves, often separate and interchangeable garments, were a canvas for the most extravagant display. They might be vast, voluminous creations, paned and slashed to reveal the cloth of gold beneath, and each slash, each seam, would be encrusted with jewels. Rows of perfectly matched pearls, fiery rubies, deep blue sapphires, and brilliant diamonds would be stitched directly onto the fabric, turning the sleeves into fantastically heavy, glittering works of art. The king's outer garment, a great, floor-length robe, would be a testament to his supreme status. Crafted from the Finest scarlet wool or the deepest velvet, it would be trimmed with a wide border of Russian sable or spotless ermine. Fur, a luxurious cascade of softness and warmth that framed his imposing figure. The embroidery on these garments was an art form in itself. Using more threads of real gold and silver, artisans would spend months creating intricate patterns of vines, flowers, and royal insignia, their work so fine it seemed to have been drawn with a brush. The sheer, physical weight of such an ensemble was immense. The king moved with a deliberate, heavy grace, the combined mass of the metal threads, the jewels, and the multiple layers of heavy fabric a constant reminder of the weight of the crown he wore. His clothing was a direct, unambiguous statement, I am the king. My wealth is boundless, my power is absolute, and I am set apart from all other mortals. As the sun is to the moon, so was the queen's wardrobe to the king's. Her attire was equally governed by the sumptuary laws and served the same function of projecting dynastic power, but it did so with its own unique language of form and symbolism. While the king's silhouette was about broad, aggressive power, the queen's was one of conical grace and immense, ground-covering presence, thanks to the wide Spanish farthingale. Her gowns were masterpieces of construction, designed to display vast, uninterrupted expanses of stupendously expensive fabric. Imagine her in a gown of silver brocade, a fabric where threads of real silver were woven into a silk base to create shimmering, raised patterns. The light would play across its surface, creating a mobile, ethereal glow as she moved. Her kirtle, the underskirt visible through the split front of her gown, might be made of crimson silk, the color a clear indication of her royal power and status. On another day, she might choose a kirtle of deep green velvet, a color associated with spring, hope, and fertility, a subtle but powerful message in a dynasty obsessed with producing a male heir. Or she might wear black. In the Tudor era, a true, deep black was one of the most difficult and expensive dyes to produce, and black velvet from Genoa or Florence was a symbol not of mourning, but of sober, sophisticated, and immense wealth. The sensory experience of the queen's presence was central to her power. As she glided across the polished wood floors of the palace, you would hear the soft, expensive whisper of her silk petticoats and the gentle, rhythmic brushing sound of the hundreds of pearls that were often stitched along the hem of her gown. It was the sound of wealth in motion. Her bodice would be rigid, adorned with a partlet of fine linen or lace, and her sleeves, like the king's, would be separate, lavishly decorated creations. Her headdress, perhaps the iconic gabled hood or the more fashionable curved French hood, was a jewel-encrusted frame for her face. A habiliment, a decorated border of goldsmith's work, set with gems and pearls, would run along the edge of the hood, a final, brilliant proclamation of her rank. Her clothing was a constant, public narrative about the state of the monarchy. Her magnificence displayed the kingdom's wealth, the richness of her fabrics announced its stability, and the symbolism of her colors could communicate a subtle message of hope, power, or piety to the watchful eyes of the court and the foreign ambassadors who reported on her every choice. The great nobles of the court, the dukes, earls, and barons, existed in a state of carefully calibrated magnificence. They were the planets orbiting the royal sun, and their own brilliance was essential to the overall splendor of the solar system, yet they had to be ever mindful not to shine so brightly as to challenge the sun itself. Their wardrobe was a constant, high-stakes balancing act. It had to be opulent enough to command respect, to visually assert their high birth and vast landholdings, and to distinguish them utterly from the lesser gentry. At the same time, it had to display a clear and respectful deference to the monarch. To misjudge this balance, to wear a fabric or a jewel that was seen as too presumptuous, could be interpreted not as a fashion error, but as a flicker of treasonous ambition. An unforgivable sin in the deeply paranoid court of Henry VIII. And so, you would see a powerful duke dressed in a doublet of the finest silk damask, its intricate, woven patterns catching the light in a subtle, elegant shimmer. His overrobe might be of a deep, lustrous velvet, but perhaps in a rich burgundy or forest green rather than the forbidden royal purple. It would be trimmed with the finest fur he was legally permitted to wear, the soft, dense pelt of the fox, or the rich brown of beaver, but never the sable or ermine of the king. The quality of his attire was undeniable. The tailoring would be exquisite, creating the powerful, broad-shouldered silhouette that was the masculine ideal. His hose would be of the finest dyed wool or silk, and his codpiece, a prominent feature of men's fashion, would be padded and decorated, a symbol of virility and swagger. His jewels would be impressive, a heavy gold chain around his neck, a ruby signet ring on his finger, but they would be fewer, and the stones smaller, than those that adorned the king. His entire appearance was a masterclass in nuance, a silent declaration that said, "I am a mighty lord, second only to my sovereign." The feeling of his clothes was one of immense quality and weight, the heavy silk rustling with a sound of authority, a constant physical reminder of his wealth and the gravity of his position in the realm. In stark and dramatic contrast to this world of calculated opulence was the attire of the hundreds of servants who moved silently and efficiently through the palace corridors. Their clothing was not a language of personal ambition, but of function and identity. A servant's primary purpose was to be both useful and invisible, and their clothing reflected this. The most important feature was not the fabric, but the color. This was the age of livery, a system in which servants wore the specific colors of the household they served, making them instantly identifiable. A servant in the king's personal household would be clad in the Tudor colors of green and white. You would see them everywhere, a walking, breathing symbol of the king's presence throughout the palace. A servant belonging to the powerful Duke of Norfolk would wear the Howard family's livery, a different combination of colors that announced his allegiance to all who saw him. Their clothing was not their own, it was a uniform, a statement of their master's identity, not their own. The materials were chosen for durability, not display. Instead of delicate silks and velvets, their garments were made from sturdy, coarse-spun English wool, dyed in solid, simple colors with less expensive vegetable dyes. A serving maid would wear a simple kirtle of brown or blue wool over a linen smock, with a plain white apron and coif covering her shoes would be of practical, hard-wearing leather, designed for long hours of standing and walking on cold stone floors. There was no farthingale to encumber her movements, no restrictive stays to make it difficult to bend and lift. The sensory experience of her clothing was one of scratchy texture and practicality. There was no soft rustle of silk, only the quiet sound of wool and linen. The men servants wore simple woolen doublets and hose in their master's colors, their clothes cut for movement, free of the excessive padding and ornamentation of their superiors. Their attire was clean and neat, as a slovenly servant reflected poorly on the household, but it was utterly devoid of the luxurious detail that defined the nobility. To see a duchess in crimson velvet brush past a serving maid in brown wool was to see the immense, unbridgeable gulf of the Tudor social order made plain. As the long day of performance and politics finally draws to a close, and the evening's entertainments have faded, the courtier retreats to the sanctuary of the bedchamber. Here, the final and perhaps most welcome ritual of the day takes place, the great undressing. This is a process of slow and deliberate deconstruction, a mirror image of the morning's elaborate ritual, but one defined by a feeling of immense relief rather than solemn preparation. The chambermaids, who began the day by building the magnificent sculpture of courtly attire, now return to carefully dismantle it. The process begins with the removal of the outermost layers. The heavy, fur-trimmed robe is lifted from your shoulders, and the weight of it is immediately gone. The jewels, the heavy pendant, the rings, the ropes of pearls, are unfastened and carefully placed into a velvet-lined casket. The pins that hold the French hood in place are meticulously removed one by one, and the heavy, restrictive headdress is lifted away. The feeling of freedom is instantaneous, as your peripheral vision returns and the weight on your head vanishes. The separate sleeves are untied, and the main gown, with its yards of heavy brocade and silk, is unlaced and gently pulled away, its luxurious fabric pooling on the floor before being taken by a maid. The farthingale, the great cage of wood and fabric, is untied and lifted off, and with its removal, you can once again perceive the true dimensions of the room around you. You are no longer an occupying force within the space, but a simple human figure. Each layer that is removed feels like a physical and psychological burden being lifted. The most significant moment of this nightly release is the unlacing of the stays. A chambermaid works at the laces at your back, and you feel the rigid, vice-like pressure begin to ease. As the stiff garment is finally pulled away from your body, you can take the first truly deep, unrestricted breath you have taken since morning. You can feel your spine slump, your shoulders relax from the forced, regal posture they have held for over 12 hours. It is a moment of profound physical liberation, a feeling of returning to your own natural form. Once you are standing in nothing but your linen chemise, the transformation is complete. You are no longer the magnificent, imposing, and untouchable noblewoman of the presence chamber. You are a vulnerable human being, feeling the chill of the room on your bare arms, your body finally at ease. The public performance is over, and the private self is allowed to re-emerge in the quiet candlelight of the bedchamber. The clothes themselves, having been removed, are not simply tossed aside. These garments represent a colossal investment, equivalent to the price of a fine house or a herd of livestock. Their care and preservation are of the utmost importance. Water was the enemy of these fine fabrics. Washing a velvet or brocade gown would ruin its texture and cause the metallic threads to tarnish. Instead of being washed, the garments are meticulously cared for by the chambermaids. They take soft brushes and carefully whisk away any dust or dirt from the day's wear. Any spots are painstakingly treated with special powders or solutions. The clothes are then hung near the fire or in a drafty corridor to air out, to remove the smells of sweat and perfume that have clung to them. Finally, the gowns, doublets, and robes are carefully folded, often with sachets of dried lavender, rose petals, and other sweet-smelling herbs placed between the layers to keep them fresh and to deter moths. They are then laid to rest in massive, iron-bound wooden chests, where they will remain until they are called upon for the next day's performance. The armor is polished and put away, ready for the social battles of the morrow. The day, with its rigid routines of council meetings and public ceremony, begins to bleed into the long, shadowed hours of the evening. It is here, in the flickering candlelight of the palace after supper, that the true nature of the court reveals itself. The great machine of state may slow, but the intricate, human web of power, ambition, and intrigue becomes more active than ever. The court is not the stone and timber of the palace, it is the constellation of people who inhabit it, a complex galaxy of souls all orbiting the single, blazing star of the monarch. Their lives are a constant, subtle dance of proximity and influence, and in the quiet, fire-lit hours, the steps of this dance are at their most intricate and most perilous. To understand the court is to understand the roles of those who walk its halls, each playing a part in the grand, unending performance. Closest to the king, forming an inner ring of immense power, are his advisors. These are the pillars of the realm. Men of formidable intellect, boundless ambition, or ancient noble lineage. You see them even in moments of leisure. Standing near the king's chair, their presence a constant source of counsel and a visible display of their own importance. A man like Thomas Cromwell, with a mind as sharp and cold as a winter morning, might be seen leaning in to murmur a quiet word into the king's ear, his plain, dark attire a stark contrast to the glittering nobles around him. A statement that his power comes not from birth, but from sheer, indispensable competence. His dark eyes seem to miss nothing, and other courtiers watch him with a palpable mixture of terror and awe, knowing that his quiet observations could lead to their ruin or their promotion. An older, more traditional nobleman, perhaps the Duke of Norfolk, represents a different kind of power. His influence comes from his vast lands and his ancient, storied name. He speaks with the king not as a servant, but as a pillar of the kingdom, their conversation and negotiation between the crown and the established aristocracy. These men are the centers of their own gravitational fields, and ambitious young courtiers flock to them, hoping to be caught in their orbit, offering loyalty in exchange for the promise of patronage. The whispered alliances forged in these quiet evening hours, the rivalries that simmer between the new administrative class and the old nobility, are the tectonic plates of Tudor politics, and their slow, grinding shifts can create earthquakes that topple even the most powerful figures. And then there are those whose power is of a different, more personal, and perhaps more potent nature. Imagine. You are standing in the long gallery, the air cool and scented with the beeswax of 100 candles. A quiet hush falls over the small groups of gossiping courtiers as a single figure enters at the far end of the hall. It is the Queen Anne Boleyn. She is a comet that has blazed into the center of their universe, and everything shifts around her. You watch her walk, her movements filled with a confident, almost Parisian grace that sets her apart from the more stoic English ladies. Her gown of black satin whispers against the polished wood floor, the sound both elegant and assertive. Around her neck is her famous pearl necklace with its golden letter B, a symbol of her identity that she wears with audacious pride. As she moves down the gallery, you can feel the eyes trailing behind her, a physical weight of observation. From the ardent young reformers and poets who see her as their champion, the looks are full of adoration and hope. From the older nobles who still hold loyalty to the former Queen, Catherine of Aragon, the stares are cold, resentful, and sharp with judgment. From the nervous, unaligned courtier, there is a quick, downward glance, a desperate attempt to appear neutral, to not be noticed by either faction. Anne herself is a master of this silent language. A warm, direct smile bestowed upon a young courtier can elevate his status instantly, signaling to all that he is under her protection. A cool, lingering look, a slight turn of her head that dismisses someone from her attention, can be a political death sentence, a sign that their influence is on the wane. Her power is not just in the king's love for her, it is in her own sharp intelligence, her wit, and her unwavering commitment to the cause of religious reform. To watch her walk the gallery is to watch a master politician at work, her every step, every glance, a move in the deadly, intricate dance for survival and supremacy. The royal court was a complex ecosystem, and it supported more than just nobles and advisors. It required a cast of characters to fulfill specific roles, each one navigating their position with a unique set of skills. In a corner, you might see the king's fool, a figure like the famous Will Sommers. He is dressed in motley, a jester's cap on his head, but his eyes are sharp and intelligent. The fool occupies a unique and privileged position. He is the only one permitted to speak unvarnished truth to the king, his criticisms and observations cleverly veiled in riddles, jokes, and seemingly nonsensical songs. When a powerful minister wishes to broach a difficult subject with the notoriously temperamental king, he might first whisper it to the fool, who can then present the idea as a jest, testing the royal mood without risk. The fool is a social commentator, a tension release valve, and often one of the most astute observers of the courts. Follies, his laughter a constant reminder of the absurdity that underpins the magnificent spectacle. Not far from him, a poet like Sir Thomas Wyatt might be leaning against a tapestry, his eyes following the Queen. His role is to add a veneer of chivalry, romance, and high culture to the court. He crafts beautiful sonnets about unrequited love and idealized beauty, his words capturing the fashionable angst of the courtly lover. But his art is also a political tool. A poem praising a lady's virtues is a public declaration of his allegiance to her and her family's faction. His songs, performed by the court musicians, can subtly praise the king's policies or mourn the fall of a patron. He wields metaphors and allegories as deftly as a soldier wields a sword, his verses a part of the constant propaganda and psychological maneuvering of court life. And moving silently among all these figures are the spies. They wear no uniform and have no title, yet they are one of the most essential components of the Tudor state. A spy could be the humble servant pouring the wine, his ears open to the conversations of the great lords. She could be a foreign lady-in-waiting in the Queen's household, reporting every nuance of court life back to a rival king. He could be a disgruntled courtier, secretly selling information to a rival faction in exchange for gold or promises of future advancement. The knowledge that anyone could be an informant created a pervasive atmosphere of paranoia, forcing everyone to be constantly on their guard. This is why the most important conversations happened in hushed tones, and why the most dangerous thoughts were never spoken aloud, but were instead committed to paper in the dead of night. Picture a courtier, long after the palace has settled into a semblance of quiet, alone in his small, cold chamber. By the light of a single, sputtering candle, he dips his quill into a pot of ink. The act of writing is slow and deliberate. Every word is chosen with immense care, for he knows that if this letter were to fall into the wrong hands, it would mean his ruin. He might be writing to an ally, confirming a secret pact, or sending instructions to his agents in the countryside. Once the message is complete, he does not simply fold it. He takes a stick of hard, colored wax, melting the end of it in the candle's flame until a small pool of molten wax drips onto the folded paper. Before it can cool and harden, he presses his signet ring into it, leaving the unique impression of his family's crest. This wax seal is both lock and signature, a guarantee of authenticity and a warning that its contents are private. The sealed letter is then hidden, perhaps in a secret compartment in a chest, awaiting a trusted courier who will smuggle it out of the palace. This small, secret act, repeated in dozens of rooms throughout the night, is the true engine of court politics, a hidden world of plotting and intrigue that underpins the glittering, public facade. The intricate web of secrets and alliances was held together not by formal treaties, but by the delicate, unspoken grammar of the court. This was a world that communicated in whispers, innuendos, and most powerfully, in silence. The air in the evening's presence chamber was thick with this invisible language, and to survive, one had to become fluent. It was a subtle dance of reputation, a constant negotiation of status performed through 1,000 microscopic gestures, each one observed and interpreted by 100 pairs of watchful eyes. A courtier's greatest skill was not their ability to fight or to debate, but their ability to read a room, to understand the currents of favor and displeasure that flowed silently beneath the surface of the polite conversation. Consider the simple act of a glance. In the flickering candlelight, a powerful duke might catch the eye of a rising young secretary from across the room and give a barely perceptible nod. To the uninitiated, it is nothing. To the court, it is a public declaration. It signals that the young man is under the duke's protection, that an alliance has been formed. The young man's value has just visibly increased. Conversely, for that same duke to stare coldly through a lesser courtier as if he were made of glass is a devastating public rebuke, a signal to all that this person is irrelevant. Their influence gone. Smiles, too, were weapons and currency. A warm, genuine smile from the king was a blessing. That could ensure a man's career, a moment of grace that would be recounted for weeks. A thin, tight-lipped smile from a rival, however, was a threat, a mask of civility that barely concealed a deep and abiding animosity. Every flicker of an eyelid, every slight inclination of the head, every momentary pause in a conversation was a piece of data to be collected, analyzed, and acted upon. In this glass house of constant observation, a person's reputation was their most valuable and most fragile asset. It was built slowly, painstakingly, through public displays of loyalty, piety, martial skill, and courtly grace. It was solidified by being seen in the company of the right people, by receiving a favorable word from the queen, or by being granted a position on an important commission. A good reputation was a shield that could deflect minor slanders and a ladder that allowed one to climb higher in the treacherous social structure. Yet, it could be shattered in an instant. Often by nothing more than a well-aimed whisper. Herein lay the ever-present tension of scandal. Actual, proven scandals were rare and often fatal, but the threat of one was a constant tool of political maneuvering. Imagine a lady-in-waiting, known for her virtue and her family's good standing. She is seen in a quiet corner of the gardens, speaking for a moment too long with a handsome court poet. Their conversation is innocent, a discussion of a new sonnet. But it is witnessed. By the next day, a rumor has taken root. The story is repeated, each telling adding a new layer of insinuation. The length of the conversation is exaggerated. Their expressions are reinterpreted as something more than polite interest. Soon, the entire court is whispering about a secret assignation. Nothing has been proven, and no formal accusation has been made, but the damage is done. The lady's reputation is now tainted by suspicion. Her husband's honor is questioned. Her rivals use the rumor to subtly undermine her position with the queen. She must now work twice as hard to appear twice as virtuous, her every move scrutinized for any further hint of impropriety. This was the true nature of courtly intrigue. Not necessarily the discovery of a great crime, but the deliberate and malicious creation of the possibility of one. Love, in this environment, was the most dangerous game of all. The concept of courtly love, with its stylized poems, dramatic sighs, and chaste devotion to an unattainable lady, was a fashionable and relatively safe pastime. It was a performance, a way for a young man to display his wit and sensitivity. But real, genuine affection was a terrifying liability. A secret love affair between two unmarried courtiers was a source of immense risk. If the match was unsuitable for their family's political ambitions, it would have to be conducted in the deepest secrecy, through coded messages and fleeting, stolen moments in forgotten corridors. The constant fear of discovery, of a letter intercepted, or a secret meeting observed, would be an unbearable strain. For a courtier to have an affair with a married woman was even more perilous, an act that could lead to a duel with a slighted husband and social ruin for them both. And for anyone to engage in an unsanctioned affair with a member of the royal family, or even one of the queen's maids of honor, was to commit an act of breathtaking recklessness that bordered on treason. The personal desires of the heart were always secondary to the political needs of the dynasty and the great families. Every romantic entanglement was a potential scandal, a thread that, if pulled, could unravel entire careers and alliances. Given this atmosphere of pervasive suspicion and constant scrutiny, the most powerful skill a courtier could possess was the art of silence. In a world where every word could be twisted, reported, and used against you, knowing when not to speak was a sign of profound intelligence and self-control. Imagine a scene where a powerful minister, seeking to entrap a rival, asks a pointed question about that rival's competence in front of a group of onlookers. A foolish courtier might agree with the criticism, making an enemy for life. An equally foolish one might leap to the rival's defense, angering the powerful minister. The wise courtier, however, would master the art of the eloquent silence. He might pause for a long moment, a thoughtful expression on his face, as if weighing the question with immense gravity, before subtly changing the subject. Or he might offer a non-committal shrug and a slight, enigmatic smile, implying the topic is beneath his consideration. This strategic use of silence was a critical tool. What was omitted from a conversation was often more significant than what was included. When the king listed the names of those who had pleased him with their service, the court listened not just for the names that were mentioned, but for the ones that were conspicuously absent. That absence was a public statement, a sign of dwindling favor. Silence was a shield, protecting one from giving a dangerous opinion. It was a weapon, used to dismiss a rival or to create an aura of mystery and wisdom. And it was a message, a subtle signal to those who knew how to interpret it. In the cacophony of whispers and flattery, the courtier who had mastered silence held a distinct and powerful advantage. As the last of the candles are extinguished and the court finally settles into its beds, the performance for the day ends, but the vigilance does not. A courtier, alone in their chamber, does not simply fall asleep. Their mind is a whirlwind of activity, replaying every conversation, every glance, every smile, every charged silence of the day. They dissect the words of their rivals, searching for hidden meanings. They analyze the king's mood, trying to predict his actions on the morrow. They map out their own strategy, planning their conversations, their alliances, their next move. In the unending game, sleep, when it comes, is often shallow, the mind still churning with the complex calculations required for survival. To live at the heart of the Tudor court was to accept that there was no true rest, only a brief, watchful pause before the sun would rise and the subtle, deadly, and magnificent dance would begin all anew. The midday hour approaches, and the great hall undergoes its final, magnificent transformation. The quiet, preparatory space of the morning has been entirely reborn. The hearth, which at dawn held only a small, struggling flame, now rages with a controlled inferno, its immense heat pushing back the stone's chill and casting a warm, dancing glow that reaches to the furthest corners of the vast room. The air is alive with the murmur of anticipation as hundreds of courtiers, dressed in their finest, begin to assemble. This is not a casual gathering for a meal, it is a formal, ritualized procession, a public affirmation of the court's order and magnificence. You enter as part of a slow-moving river of silk, velvet, and jewels, the collective rustle of expensive fabric a sound like the wind in a forest of wealth. The sight that greets you is one of overwhelming, ordered abundance. The long trestle tables, which were bare wood just hours ago, are now draped in pristine white linen tablecloths. The sheer expanse of white is a statement in itself, a testament to the immense cost and labor required to produce and maintain such quantities of fine cloth. The linen has been folded with geometric precision, its crisp creases a testament to the meticulous work of the laundry maids. At each place setting, the arrangements speak of the rigid hierarchy that governs all things. For most courtiers, the plate is a trencher, a thick, square slab of day-old bread, its purpose not to be eaten, but to serve as an absorbent plate for the meats and sauces of the meal. Beside it lies a personal knife, brought by the courtier themselves, and a spoon, for the many pottages and soups. Forks are a rare, almost unheard of novelty from Italy. The primary tools are The spoon, the knife, and one's own fingers, which is why a folded linen napkin is also provided, an essential accessory for maintaining a veneer of cleanliness. The geography of power is most clearly mapped out by the seating arrangements. Your position at these tables is not a matter of choice, it is a public declaration of your exact standing in the court on this particular day. The hall is divided by a single, crucial landmark, the Great Salt Cellar. This is not a small shaker, but a massive, ornate sculpture of silver gilt, sometimes crafted in the shape of a ship or a fantastical beast. It sits on the high table, and its position defines the social landscape. To be seated above the salt means you are a person of significant rank and honor, placed closer to the monarch and the center of power. To be seated below the salt is to be relegated to the lower echelons of the court. You watch as a young lord, his face flushed with pride, is guided by a steward to a seat just above the salt, a clear sign of his rising favor. Further down the hall, you see a veteran administrator, recently out of favor, being seated far below the salt, a subtle but brutal public demotion that will be noted by everyone. The anxiety and relief that ripples through the crowd as people find their assigned places is a palpable current in the room. At the head of the hall, on a raised platform known as the dais, sits the high table. Here, the display of wealth is unrestrained. The tablecloth is of the finest damask, its woven patterns shimmering in the light. The trenchers are replaced with plates of solid pewter or, for the royal family, silver gilt. The drinking vessels are not the leather jacks or simple cups of the lower tables, but magnificent silver goblets, many studded with gemstones, their polished surfaces reflecting the colors of the courtiers' clothes and the stained glass windows above. The king's presence. Here is the focal point of the entire room. He sits at the center of the table, a living sun around which every other body in the room orbits. His chair is larger, more ornate, almost a throne, and the space around him is imbued with a palpable aura of power and authority. As the last of the courtiers find their places, a hush falls. The musicians, seated in a gallery high above the hall, begin to play. The hesitant, practicing notes of the morning have been replaced by a confident, flowing melody. The gentle, interwoven voices of the harp and the lute create a soothing, elegant soundscape, a beautiful wallpaper of music designed to accompany the meal without overwhelming conversation. The sound of 100 quiet conversations begins to hum through the hall, a low buzz of courtly chatter. Then, the feast begins. A procession of servants emerges from the kitchens, moving with the synchronized precision of a well-drilled army. They are led by the steward of the household, his staff of office held high. Each servant carries a great platter, and as they make their way to the high table first, the first course is revealed. The food itself is another expression of the court's hierarchy. The first dish to be served is often a light pottage or broth, designed to open the appetite and warm the stomach. It might be a creamy, almond milk-based soup, delicately spiced with saffron and ginger, for those at the high table. By the time the soup reaches the lower tables, it is a simpler, more rustic vegetable or barley broth. The act of eating begins with the breaking of bread. The sound of crusts snapping, a communal, gentle crackle, ripples down the long tables. Then come the first of the roasted meats. A servant presents a platter holding a roasted swan, its feathers meticulously replaced, to the king's carver. The finest, most tender slices are carved for the monarch. What remains is then passed down the table. The same happens with a great roasted boar, its skin crackling and its head still intact, presented with an apple in its mouth. The choicest cuts go to the most important people. Those at the far end of the hall will receive slices from the less desirable parts of the animal. The portions, like the seating, are a direct reflection of one's worth. Even the drink is stratified. The finest French wines are poured into the silver goblets of the high table, while the lower tables are served with the best English ale. As the first course is consumed, the gentle clinking of knives on pewter and the soft murmur of conversation blend with the continuous music from the gallery. The servants move like clockwork, their movements economical and silent as they clear away the first set of dishes and prepare for the second course. The atmosphere is one of disciplined, orderly indulgence. It is a performance of civility, status, and abundance, all proceeding with a calm, predictable rhythm. And then, the king decides to speak. He may wish to comment on the quality of the venison, or to ask a question of the French ambassador seated near him. The moment he raises his voice, even slightly, a remarkable thing happens. The vast, complex symphony of the hall comes to an abrupt and total halt. The musicians in the gallery, watching for this very cue, instantly silence their instruments. The web of conversations across the hall is cut mid-sentence. The servants, even those in the middle of lifting a heavy platter, freeze in place. The gentle clinking of cutlery stops. A profound silence descends upon the entire room, a vacuum of sound where hundreds of people hold their breath. Every eye turns to the high table, every ear strains to hear the royal words. In this moment, the king is the only person who exists. His voice, clear and unchallenged in the sudden stillness, is the only sound in the universe. This absolute, immediate silence is the most powerful demonstration of his authority. It is a reminder that all the wealth, all the status, all the music and chatter exist only by his permission. When he has finished speaking, and perhaps received a reply, he will gesture with his hand, and as if a spell has been broken, the world rushes back in. The musicians resume their melody, the chatter slowly rebuilds, and the servants continue their clockwork dance. The feast continues, but everyone in the room has just been reminded of where the true power resides. The first course, a gentle prelude of broths and simple meats, is cleared away by the seamless ballet of servants. A momentary pause settles upon the hall, a collective intake of breath before the true heart of the feast is revealed. The musicians in the gallery, who had been playing soft, unobtrusive melodies, now strike a louder, more triumphant chord. A fanfare from a cornet or a shawm cuts through the air, and all eyes turn towards the great doors leading from the kitchens. A new procession begins, grander and more theatrical than the first. It is led by the High Steward, his staff of office held aloft, his face a mask of solemn importance. Behind him, a line of servants emerges, moving in pairs, their arms straining under the weight of massive silver platters. This is the second course, the great course. The centerpiece of the meal, where the full power and wealth of the host are put on magnificent display. The aroma that precedes the procession is overwhelming, a rich, complex wave of roasting meat, fragrant spices, and savory sauces that washes over the diners, silencing the low hum of conversation. The first platter to arrive is a spectacle in itself. On it rests a whole roasted boar, its tusks gilded, its skin cooked to a perfect, crackling brown, and its mouth still ferociously clutching a polished apple. It is a beast of the hunt, a symbol of primal, masculine strength, now tamed and presented for the pleasure of the court. It is paraded slowly past the high table before being set before the royal carver. Another platter follows, bearing a great roasted swan, its body arched gracefully and its feathers meticulously replaced, making it appear as if it had simply glided onto the silver dish to rest. This is not merely food, it is edible art, a display of the kitchen's skill in both cooking and illusion. Then comes the beef, a massive side of a roasted ox, its surface dark and savory, then the venison, larded and cooked to tender perfection. Then a confusing, wonderful array of smaller birds, herons, bustards, pheasants, partridges, each roasted or baked. In a pie, and each served with its own specific, traditional sauce. The carving of the meat is its own form of theater. It is not done by just any servant, but by a gentleman carver, a man of good birth whose skill with a blade is demonstrated not on the battlefield, but at the dinner table. He stands before the high table, his knives long and razor-sharp. With a series of swift, elegant, and practiced movements, he dissects the great roasts, dispatching perfect, thin slices onto the king's plate. His performance is silent, focused, and deeply impressive, a display of grace and precision. As at every other stage, the hierarchy is paramount. The king receives the choicest cut, the tenderest slice of the boar, the breast of the swan. The next best portions go to the queen and the most honored guests. The rest is then distributed down the tables, the quality and desirability of the cuts diminishing with every yard of distance from the royal dais. To receive a tough or gristly piece of meat was a subtle but clear reminder of one's lowly position in this grand ecosystem. The meats are accompanied by incredibly complex sauces. This is where the kitchen spice chest is put to use. A sauce for the venison might be a rich, dark mixture of its own blood, red wine, vinegar, and a heady blend of black pepper, cloves, and cinnamon. A sauce for the fowl might be lighter, based on verjuice or white wine, and colored a brilliant yellow with expensive saffron. These sauces are thick, powerful, and pungent, designed not to complement the flavor of the meat in the modern sense, but to create a new, exciting taste, and to demonstrate the host's ability to afford the rare and costly spices from the East. Alongside the meats are the great pies, magnificent pastry constructions with thick, coffin-like crusts designed to keep the contents moist during the long baking process. When the crust of one is broken, a cloud of fragrant steam erupts, revealing a rich filling of diced meats, dried fruits, and spices. Some pies are built for spectacle, their crusts hiding live birds that, upon being released, fly up into the rafters of the great hall, a moment of startling, chaotic magic that brings gasps and applause from the diners. As this monumental course is being consumed, the atmosphere in the hall shifts from one of polite anticipation to one of noisy, convivial indulgence. The gentle clinking of the first course is replaced by the more robust sounds of serious eating. But a great feast was designed to delight all the senses, not just taste and smell. As the pace of eating slows, a space is created for another form of consumption, entertainment. The musicians in the gallery might shift their tune to a more lively dance number, a galliard or a volta. Then, the king's fool might be called upon. He tumbles and capers his way to the foot of the dais, his bells jingling. He might perform a series of clever riddles, their answers subtly flattering the king. He might engage in a mock argument with one of the high ministers, his jests and insults cleverly crafted to deliver a pointed social commentary that no one else would dare to utter. His performance provides a moment of shared laughter that temporarily bridges the vast gaps in status, his licensed foolishness a necessary release valve for the immense pressure and formality of the court. Following the jester, a poet might be invited to recite his latest work, his voice clear and formal as he delivers verses praising the beauty of the queen or celebrating a recent victory of the king's armies, his art another tool in the service of dynastic propaganda. Before the final course is served, another important ritual takes place. Servants move down the tables carrying silver ewers filled with warm, scented water, often rosewater, along with fine linen towels. They move first to the high table, where they kneel and pour a gentle stream of water over the waiting hands of the king, the queen, and their guests, who then pat their fingers dry on the offered towels. This is a practical necessity in an age of eating with one's hands. But it is also another carefully choreographed display of service and hierarchy. The warmth of the water, the fragrance of the roses, the softness of the linen, all are small, luxurious comforts that reinforce the privileged status of those at the top. Finally, the third and final course arrives, a course designed not for sustenance, but for pure, unadulterated pleasure and wonder. This is the course of sweetmeats, jellies, and subtleties. Platters are brought forth bearing shimmering jellies, dyed in brilliant colors and molded into the shapes of animals or castles. There are dishes of creamy custards, thick with eggs and cream and richly flavored with nutmeg and mace. There are candied fruits, and comfits, seeds or nuts coated in a hard sugar shell. And there are incredible creations made from marzipan, a sweet almond paste that could be sculpted like clay. But the crowning glory of this final course is the subtlety. This is a massive, intricate sugar sculpture, the masterpiece of the head cook. It might be a stunningly detailed model of one of the king's castles, or a scene from mythology like St. George slaying the dragon, or a political allegory representing the king's triumph over his enemies. These subtleties were not meant to be eaten, they were pure theater, objects of wonder designed to be admired and discussed, the final, dazzling display of the court's wealth and artistic sophistication. To conclude the meal, small, crisp wafers are served alongside a potent, spiced wine known as hypocras, a sweet, fragrant concoction believed to aid digestion. The feast winds down. The king, his appetite sated and his senses delighted, finally pushes his chair back and rises. This is the signal. The feast is over. He leads his closest circle out of the great hall, perhaps to his private chambers to rest, or to the gardens for a gentle walk in the afternoon air. As soon as the royal party is gone, the spell is broken. The rest of the court rises, the sound of scraping benches and rustling gowns filling the hall. They disperse, moving on to the next phase of the day's routine. Left behind is a scene of magnificent carnage. The tables are a landscape of debris, gnawed bones, discarded bread trenchers, spilled wine staining the white linen. The air is heavy and thick with the combined smells of 1,000 dishes and hundreds of people. The servants, who have worked tirelessly for hours, now begin the monumental task of clearing away the remnants of the spectacle, their work continuing long after the nobles have forgotten the meal. The great performance has ended, leaving only the memory of its splendor and the quiet work of restoring order. The great midday feast, with its waves of rich food and potent wine, has concluded. A gentle, pleasant lethargy settles upon the court, and the afternoon unfolds not with the urgent business of the morning, but with a series of more refined and leisurely diversions. This is a time for the display of culture, the practice of skill, and the quiet continuation of the court's intricate social games. The energy of the palace shifts from the grand, public stage of the great hall to the more intimate, private withdrawing chambers and the sun-dappled grounds outside. Here, in the slow, golden hours of the afternoon, the true character of the courtier is revealed not in their formal duties, but in how they choose to pass their time. In a quiet, sunlit chamber away from the main thoroughfares of the palace, a fire crackles softly in the hearth. Here, you might find one of the court's most popular and intellectually demanding pastimes underway, a game of chess. Two courtiers, perhaps a seasoned, calculating duke and an ambitious young bishop, are seated on opposite sides of a beautifully crafted board of inlaid ebony and ivory. The air around them is thick with intense, silent concentration. This is no mere game, it is a miniature war, a bloodless battle of strategy and foresight that perfectly mirrors the political machinations of their daily lives. The chessmen themselves are small works of art, carved from polished bone or walrus tusk. The rooks are not castles, but miniature warders or sentinels, the bishops are archers, their bows drawn. You watch as the duke, his face a mask of calm contemplation, slowly extends a hand and moves his knight. The soft, solid click of the bone piece on the ivory square is the only sound in their immediate vicinity. His opponent, the young bishop, does not react immediately. He leans forward, his chin resting on his hand, his eyes scanning the entire board, calculating not just the next move, but the next 10. Every piece represents an asset, every square a potential territory to be won or lost. The king is the center of the world, vulnerable yet all-important. The queen is a powerful, versatile force. The knights move in unexpected, devious ways, while the pawns, seemingly insignificant, can advance to achieve great power or be sacrificed to protect a more valuable piece. The parallels to their own lives are undeniable. Every move is a risk, every capture a small triumph, and a single moment of inattention can lead to an inescapable checkmate. For the onlookers gathered around the board, it is a silent education in strategy, a masterclass in the art of thinking many steps ahead of your rival. In another corner of the same chamber, a different kind of performance is taking place. A small, select group of court ladies and gentlemen have gathered around a young courtier known for his poetic talents. He holds a small, leather-bound book, his own personal collection of handwritten verses, and reads aloud. His voice is not loud or theatrical, but measured, calm, and infused with a fashionable melancholy. He recites a sonnet, a complex and tightly structured poem about the exquisite pain of loving a beautiful and unattainable lady. The language is rich with clever metaphors, classical allusions to Petrarch or Ovid, and witty turns of phrase known as conceits. He might compare his lady's eyes to stars, her cruelty to a winter frost, and his own suffering to a feverish illness. The audience listens with a quiet, appreciative intensity. This is a display of culture, a shared moment of refined artistic sensibility. To understand the poem's intricate structure and to catch its subtle allusions is a mark of a sophisticated and educated courtier. You see the ladies sigh softly at a particularly poignant line, their expressions ones of gentle sympathy for the poet's plight, even though they all understand that this suffering is a stylized literary pose. The men nod in appreciation of a particularly clever rhyme or a well-turned metaphor. The reading is an intimate and bonding experience for this small circle. It reaffirms their shared values of beauty, wit, and courtly love. And it elevates the often brutal realities of their lives into the more elegant and palatable realm of art. The soft cadence of the poet's voice, weaving a tale of love and longing, provides a gentle, intellectual counterpoint to the silent, strategic warfare of the nearby chessboard. While these indoor pursuits unfold, a different kind of entertainment is taking place beyond the palace walls. The king, or a great noble, having rested after the feast, might decide on a slow-paced afternoon hunt. This is not the frenetic, large-scale chase of a stag that requires the entire court's participation. This is a more relaxed and private affair, an opportunity to enjoy the outdoors and engage in quiet conversation away from the ever-present ears of the court. You watch from a high stone balcony as the small party assembles in the courtyard. The number of horses is small, the hounds fewer and less boisterous. The purpose today might be to hunt for smaller game, like wildfowl or rabbits, or simply to ride through the king's private parkland. As they ride out, the sounds of the court fade, replaced by the gentle, rhythmic sounds of the countryside. The primary sound is the soft, thudding rhythm of the horses' hooves on the damp, grassy earth. It is a steady, calming beat, a natural percussion that sets the pace for the afternoon. Accompanying this is the happy panting of the dogs, who run ahead, their noses to the ground, occasionally letting out an excited yelp as they pick up a scent. Above it all is the sound of the forest wind, a soft, sighing whisper as it moves through the high canopy of the ancient oaks and Beaches. It is a clean, natural sound, a world away from the echoing stone corridors of the palace. For the riders, this is a chance to breathe, to speak more freely. A king might use this opportunity to have a private word with a trusted minister, their conversation about matters of state now carried on the wind instead of in a stuffy chamber. It is a moment of release, a temporary escape from the rigid formality and a chance to reconnect with the more primal, natural world that exists just beyond the castle walls. Returning your gaze to the quiet chambers of the palace, you might find a scene of absolute stillness and concentration. In a room with good northern light, a great lady sits motionless in a heavy chair, her hands folded in her lap, her expression serene and impassive. Before her stands an artist at his easel, a man like the great Hans Holbein, his presence at court a major status symbol in itself. This is the painstaking process of having one's portrait painted, and it is an exercise in extreme discipline for both sitter and artist. The room is silent, save for the faint, dry scratch of charcoal on a prepared wooden panel as the artist lays down his initial sketch, or the whisper-soft brush of a fine sable bristle applying a thin glaze of oil paint. The artist's focus is total. His eyes, sharp and analytical, dart back and forth between the noblewoman's face and his work. He is not merely copying what he sees, he is constructing an image. He is capturing the precise texture of her velvet gown, the exact shimmer of the pearls on her hood, the glint of light on her jeweled pendant. But most importantly, he is capturing the nobility of her gaze. Her expression is carefully neutral, her gaze directed slightly away, giving her an air of distant, regal authority. The portrait is not meant to be a window into her soul or to reveal her fleeting emotions. It is meant to be a permanent, idealized record of her status, her wealth, and her virtue. It is a carefully crafted piece of propaganda that will hang in a gallery for generations, a testament to her family's power. For the lady, the process is an ordeal of stillness. She must hold this pose for hours, day after day, a monumental act of self-control. The silence of the room is the silence of creation, the quiet, focused work of immortalizing a mortal face and ensuring that her legacy, at least as she wishes it to be perceived, will endure. From the stone balcony of the palace, your gaze is drawn to the wide, green expanse of the parkland below. Here, another form of courtly theater is unfolding, one that pits human skill against the wild instincts of nature. This is the art of falconry, the sport of kings and the passionate pursuit of the highest nobility. A small party of lords and ladies has gathered, their fine clothes a vibrant jewel-toned splash against the green landscape. The atmosphere is one of focused anticipation. A falconer, a man whose entire life is dedicated to the training and care of these magnificent birds, stands at the center of the group. On his thick leather gauntlet perches a peregrine falcon, its head covered by a small, ornate leather hood that keeps it calm and docile. The bird is a living treasure, more valuable than the horse its master rides. Its sleek, mottled feathers, its sharp, curved beak, and the powerful talons that grip the glove all speak of its nature as a perfect aerial predator. The moment of the hunt begins with a quiet ritual. The falconer speaks in low, soothing tones to the bird as he carefully removes the leather hood. The falcon's head whips up, its dark, incredibly sharp eyes taking in the vastness of the sky in an instant. It is a moment of transformation, as the bird awakens from its placid state into one of supreme, predatory awareness. Another servant might be sent to flush out the prey, perhaps a heron from a nearby marsh. As the large bird takes to the air, the falconer untethers his own bird from the glove. With a powerful thrust of his arm, the falcon is launched into the sky. It does not fly directly at its quarry. Instead, with breathtaking speed and power, it begins to climb, its wings beating in a steady rhythm, carving a great spiral into the air. It rises higher and higher, until it is just a small, dark speck against the clouds, positioning itself for the attack. The courtly observers on the ground watch this ascent with rapt attention, their heads craned towards the sky. The beauty and power of the falcon's flight is a spectacle in itself. Then, the moment comes. The falcon, having achieved its optimal height, spots its prey far below. It angles its body, folds its wings, and begins its attack. This is the stoop, a legendary display of speed and lethality. The bird plummets from the sky like a feathered stone, a streak of controlled violence. The sound of the wind rushing past its wings is a low, tearing roar. The descent is so fast it is almost impossible to follow, a blur that ends with a sudden, explosive puff of feathers in the distance as the falcon strikes the heron in midair. The hunt is over in a matter of seconds. The falconer sounds a horn and gallops off to retrieve his bird and its prize. For the nobles watching, this was not just a sport. It was a powerful metaphor for their own world, a display of training, control, and the application of beautiful, deadly force from a position of superior height and power. Returning to the quiet, sun-dappled interiors of the palace, the afternoon's entertainments take on a more gentle and refined character. In a private chamber, where the light is soft, a young noblewoman might be taking her daily music lesson. Proficiency in music was not a mere hobby, it was an essential accomplishment for any lady of high birth, a mark of her sophisticated education and her fitness to grace a noble household. She might be seated with a lute, its pear-shaped body resting comfortably in her lap. The instrument itself is a work of art, made of light, resonant wood. Its peg box angled back sharply. Her tutor, a master musician, guides her with quiet words as she practices a complex piece. Her fingers press delicately on the gut strings, forming the chords, while her right hand plucks the strings with a practiced touch. The music is soft, intricate, and melancholic, perfectly suited to the themes of love and longing that were so popular in courtly poetry. On another day, the lesson might be at the virginals, a small, rectangular keyboard instrument, a precursor to the harpsichord. The instrument rests on a table, its case perhaps beautifully painted with pastoral scenes. The sound it produces is a delicate, precise plucking, each note a small, bright jewel of sound. The lady practices a pavane, a slow, stately court dance, her fingers carefully navigating the ivory and ebony keys. The music is highly structured, almost mathematical in its elegance. It requires immense discipline and practice to master. These lessons, whether on the lute, the virginals, or with the voice, were part of the daily routine, a quiet, focused pursuit that filled the long afternoon hours. The soft melodies that drifted from these chambers were the gentle, cultivated soundtrack to the court's inner life, a world of artistic refinement that stood in stark contrast to the political maneuvering in the council chambers and the raw energy of the courtyards. Elsewhere in the palace, another kind of performance is being prepared, one that combines music, poetry, and drama. In a large, shadowed chamber, perhaps the great hall itself, temporarily cleared for the purpose, a group of courtiers is engaged in a quiet rehearsal. They are preparing a mask, a highly fashionable form of entertainment for the evening. These are not professional actors, they are the lords and ladies of the court themselves, and their participation is a key part of the fun. You watch as they, out of their heavy formal wear and in more practical clothing, walk through their parts under the direction of the master of revels. Their voices are low as they recite the poetic lines written for them by the court poet, the verse likely a complex allegory about virtue, love, or the monarch's wisdom. Their movements are still uncertain as they practice the steps of a choreographed dance that will be a centerpiece of the performance. A group of musicians in a corner quietly plays the accompanying music, allowing the dancers to learn the timing. This is a rare, behind-the-scenes glimpse of the immense effort that went into creating the seemingly effortless spectacles of the court. It is a world of focused work, of repeated lines and practiced steps, all dedicated to crafting an evening of illusion and delight. As night falls, the preparations and rehearsals culminate in the event itself, the masked dance. The great hall is once again ablaze with the light of 1,000 candles and torches. The musicians are playing a loud, inviting melody. The court is assembled, but it has been transformed into a world of mystery and disguise. Everyone, or at least the main performers and dancers, is wearing a mask. These masks, often made of velvet, silk, or painted leather, conceal their identities, creating an intoxicating atmosphere of anonymity and licensed misrule. A simple black mask might create an aura of elegant mystery. A more elaborate, gilded mask might represent a classical god or goddess, like Diana or Apollo, linking the mask to its mythological theme. This act of concealment changes the very dynamic of the court. A man might find himself dancing with a lady whose identity is a mystery, their flirtatious conversation made bolder by the anonymity of their masks. Alliances can be hinted at and secrets exchanged under the cover of the disguise. The centerpiece of the evening is the formal, choreographed dance. The masked figures move through the stately, elegant steps of a pavane, their magnificent, often specially made costumes swirling around them. The dance is a moving tapestry of color and texture, a beautiful, ordered spectacle that is the culmination of the day's rehearsals. For these few hours, the rigid, known world of the court is replaced by a glittering, dreamlike state, a world of shadows, music, and secrets. It is the ultimate Tudor entertainment, a perfect blend of artifice, beauty, and the thrilling tension of the unknown, a final, magnificent performance to end a day devoted to the art of being seen. To pass from the public chambers of the court into the private apartments of the Queen is to cross a threshold into another world. The air itself seems to change. The boisterous, masculine energy of the King's court, with its loud negotiations, clanging footsteps, and boisterous displays of power, dissolves at the door. Here, a guarded quietude reigns. An usher stands at the entrance, a silent gatekeeper to this inner sanctum, and his solemn nod is the only permission one needs to enter a realm governed by a different set of rules, sounds, and sensibilities. The first thing you notice is the warmth, a gentle, even heat that radiates not just from a well-tended fireplace, but from the very walls themselves, which are covered in a dense layer of tapestries. There are more tapestries here than anywhere else in the palace, their woven threads absorbing both sound and chill, creating a soft, insulated cocoon. The subjects depicted are different, too. The grand, violent scenes of battle or the hunt are replaced by stories from mythology featuring wise goddesses and virtuous heroines, or idyllic pastoral landscapes where shepherds and shepherdesses repose in a world of perpetual, peaceful twilight. The sounds are softer. The hard echo of stone is gone, replaced by the whisper of slippers on wood floors, which themselves are often covered with rare and precious carpets from the Orient. Voices are never raised, conversation is a low, continuous murmur, a gentle stream of sound that flows beneath the surface of the chamber's stillness. The light seems softer, too, filtered through high windows of expensive glass, its beams falling upon polished wooden furniture, the rich gloss of a lady's satin sleeve, or the deep, soft pile of a velvet cushion. This is a world designed for peace, dignity, and stillness, a carefully constructed haven from the chaotic, competitive world that lies just beyond its doors. It is the heart of the court's feminine power, a place of quiet influence and immense, understated grace. The main chamber of the Queen's apartments is a study in luxurious comfort and domestic order. While the King's chambers are often cluttered with the tools of statecraft, maps, documents, and weapons, the Queen's rooms are arranged for society, art, and quiet contemplation. Her own chair of estate, covered in rich velvet and embroidered with her personal insignia, occupies a place of honor, but it is surrounded by smaller, cushioned stools and benches, where her ladies may sit. Great, carved wooden chests line the walls, their surfaces polished to a dark gleam. They hold the Queen's vast wardrobe, her jewels, and her linens, a treasury of personal and dynastic wealth. A large table might stand in the center of the room, but instead of being used for meals, it is draped with a heavy, patterned turkey carpet, its intricate designs and rich colors a display of phenomenal expense, as these carpets were considered too valuable to be walked upon. And nestled amongst this quiet splendor, you will find the small, living jewels of the court, the Queen's pet dogs. Curled upon a velvet cushion near the fire, you might see a pair of tiny spaniels, their long, silky ears fanned out around them as they sleep. Or perhaps a slim, elegant greyhound, a favorite breed of the nobility, is resting its head on the lap of a lady-in-waiting, its body a perfect curve of peaceful slumber. These creatures add a vital spark of life and domesticity to the formal environment. The sound of their quiet, sleeping breaths, the occasional soft sigh or the faint jingle of a tiny silver bell on a collar, are integral parts of the room's gentle soundscape. They are petted, pampered, and beloved, their presence a testament to the fact that even in this highly politicized world, there is space for simple affection and uncomplicated companionship. The primary occupation within these chambers, the gentle work that fills the long afternoon hours, is needlework. You see a group of the Queen's ladies gathered in a circle where the light from the window is best. Their heads are bowed in concentration over their individual embroidery frames. The only sounds are the soft sigh of silk thread being pulled from a skein and the whisper-quiet shush of the needle passing through fine linen. Their fingers, adorned with rings, move with a deft, practiced grace. They are creating intricate patterns, perhaps embroidering a shirt for the King with tiny blackwork flowers, or adding gold thread to the cuff of a sleeve. On a larger frame, several ladies might be working together on a single, massive piece, a new tapestry for the wall or a decorative cover for the Queen's bed. This is not idle work. It is a highly valued skill, a demonstration of the patience, artistry, and diligence expected of a noblewoman. It is a quiet, meditative task that keeps the hands busy and fosters a sense of calm, communal industry. Other attendants are engaged in different, equally quiet tasks. In one corner, a lady-in-waiting is helping another to dress her hair for the evening. Seated on a low stool, she uses a comb made of ivory or polished boxwood, its teeth passing smoothly through the long tresses. The sound is a gentle, rhythmic scratching, a soothing and intimate act of personal grooming. Elsewhere, another attendant prepares for the Queen's correspondence. She sits at a small, dedicated writing desk. With a sharp penknife, she carefully sharpens a goose quill to a perfect, fine point. She takes a solid block of black ink and, adding a few drops of water, grinds it in a small dish until it reaches the right consistency. These preparatory acts are slow and precise, a ritual performed before the first word can even be written. They are part of the chamber's overall atmosphere of focused, unhurried, and dignified activity. At the heart of this quiet world is the Queen's own spiritual life. There will be times when she retreats from her main chamber into her private closet or oratory. This is her most personal sanctuary, a small space furnished with a finely carved prie-dieu and perhaps a single, small stained glass window depicting her patron saint. Here, she will kneel. The great volume of her skirts pooling around her, and open her personal book of hours. The book is her most precious possession, a masterpiece of devotional art, its pages filled with luminous paintings and gold leaf. You might hear the softest whisper of prayer as her lips move, reciting the familiar Latin verses. It is a moment of profound stillness, a direct communion between the Queen and her God, a source of strength and solace that is entirely separate from her public role. This deep piety was central to the identity of a Tudor queen, a public model of virtue whose private devotion was seen as a vital conduit for divine favor upon the entire kingdom. When she emerges from these private prayers, the atmosphere in the main chamber might shift to one of gentle, shared companionship. The embroidery is set aside for a moment. The ladies draw their stools closer together, and the quiet murmurs of the room cohere into stories and laughter. This is where the female community of the court truly comes alive. The laughter is never loud or unruly, it is a soft, suppressed sound, a shared secret in the safety of their private world. They might share a slightly scandalous but amusing story about a clumsy courtier from a rival court, or read aloud a letter from a sister or cousin in the countryside, its news of births and harvests a welcome reminder of a world beyond the palace walls. It is in these moments of shared, whispered confidence that the true bonds between the Queen and her ladies are forged. They are her confidants, her companions, and her eyes and ears in the wider court. Their loyalty is her greatest shield, and their companionship, her greatest comfort. This quiet, dignified, and protected world, hidden behind guarded doors, is the true source of the Queen's strength and resilience. Yet, to mistake the peace of the Queen's apartments for a lack of power would be a grave error. This quiet, feminine world was not a retreat from the politics of the court, but rather its alternative center, a place where influence was wielded with a velvet glove rather than an iron fist. While the king's court was the arena for overt displays of power, for formal decrees and public pronouncements, the Queen's chambers were the home of subtle persuasion, personal patronage, and the soft, strategic application of influence. It was here, in the quiet afternoons, that the Queen would receive visitors, her chamber becoming a secondary, more intimate court. A high-born lady, whose husband sought a wardship or a valuable piece of land from the king, would know that a direct approach was often fruitless. A far better strategy was to petition the Queen. You would watch this unfold as the lady, dressed in her finest, would kneel before the Queen, presenting her case not as a political demand, but as a humble appeal for her grace and assistance. The Queen would listen patiently, her expression serene, her hands still perhaps working on her embroidery. Her response would be gentle, non-committal, but a quiet promise to speak a good word to His Majesty on your behalf. Was a political intervention of immense value, a demonstration of the soft power that could shape careers and fortunes. Foreign ambassadors, too, understood the importance of this inner sanctum. A formal audience with the king and his council was a rigid, posturing affair. A less formal invitation to the Queen's apartments, however, offered a chance to gauge the true mood of the court. Here, an ambassador could employ charm and wit, engaging the Queen and her ladies in conversation about art, music, and fashion in their home countries. But beneath the surface of this polite cultural exchange, a subtle intelligence operation was underway. The ambassador would observe the Queen's favor, noting which ladies were closest to her, and would listen for any nuance in her conversation that might betray the king's true intentions regarding foreign policy. The Queen, for her part, was an equal player in this game, using her charm to extract information and project an image of a stable, cultured, and confident English court. This was diplomacy conducted not over a council table, but over a lute and an embroidery frame. The written word was a vital conduit for the queen's influence, a way for her to extend her presence far beyond the palace walls. The quiet preparations of the ink and quill would be followed by the focused work of correspondence. The queen, possessing a fine education, might write some personal letters herself, her elegant script filling the page. For more formal matters, she would dictate to a secretary. A letter might be dispatched to her royal relatives in Spain or France, a carefully constructed missive blending expressions of familial affection with subtle political observations and assurances of England's strength. Another letter might be one of patronage, addressed to the head of a university college, recommending a bright young scholar for a position. This was a way for the queen to build her own network of loyal, educated men who owed their careers directly to her favor. She would also engage in correspondence with the great noblewomen of the realm, her letters a web of social connection that helped to bind the aristocracy to the crown. Each letter, folded and sealed with her personal wax seal, was a small vessel of her power, sent out from the quiet of her chambers to shape the wider world. The most profound expression of the queen's role, however, was found in her duties as a mother. The dynastic survival of the Tudors rested squarely on her shoulders, and her apartments were not just a court, but also the gateway to the royal nursery. During the day, the royal children, a prince or princess, would be brought from their own suite of rooms to spend time with their mother. The moment they entered, the atmosphere of the chamber would shift. The formal dignity of the court would be softened by a wave of maternal affection and dynastic pride. You would see the ladies-in-waiting sink into deep curtsies as the royal heir, dressed in miniature versions of adult clothing, was led in by their nurse. The queen's face, often composed and serene, would break into a genuine, unguarded smile. She might take her son onto her lap, his small hand playing with the jewels on her gown, and ask him about his lessons with his tutor. Or she might watch as her young daughter takes her first wobbly steps across the floor, the ladies clapping softly in encouragement. These were rare moments of domestic intimacy, but they were also profoundly political acts. A healthy, thriving prince was the living embodiment of the kingdom's future stability. A beautiful young princess was a priceless asset to be used in the high-stakes game of international marriage alliances. The nursery was run with the same meticulous care as the treasury. A team of nurses, physicians, and tutors attended to the children's every need, their health and education a matter of state importance. For the queen, her children were both the objects of her deepest personal love and the living symbols of her own success and her ultimate duty to the crown. As evening deepened, the king himself would often make his way to the queen's apartments. When his impending arrival was announced, the chamber would subtly reconfigure. The ladies-in-waiting would gather their needlework, give a final, affectionate pat to the sleeping dogs, and with a series of low curtsies, retreat to an antechamber, leaving the royal couple in a state of carefully managed privacy. This was when the true partnership behind the throne could be seen. The king, having shed the public burdens of the day, would relax. He might slump into a chair by the fire, his great legs stretched out, and speak to his wife not as a monarch to a subject, but as a man to his confidant. It was in these quiet, intimate hours that the queen's influence was at its most direct. She could offer him counsel on the day's events, soothe his famously volatile temper, or advocate for a particular cause or candidate she favored. They might play a game of cards, their conversation a mix of personal affection and political strategy. A musician might be summoned to play a soft melody on the lute, creating a gentle soundtrack for their evening. This was the private marriage that underpinned the public dynasty, a relationship of immense complexity, blending love, duty, ambition, and the shared, lonely burden of the crown. The chapter of the day concludes as the king departs, and the queen herself prepares for rest. The undressing ritual begins once more, a quiet and final release from the day's performance. The maids move with practiced efficiency, unlacing the gown, removing the heavy jewels, and lifting away the hood. The magnificent and constricting layers are removed one by one, until the queen stands once more in her simple linen chemise. The public icon is gone, replaced by a solitary woman. Her hair is brushed out, the long, unbound locks a symbol of her final release from the day's formal constraints. After a last, quiet prayer, she climbs the steps to her great, curtained bed. The last candle is extinguished. The fire is banked, its embers glowing softly in the darkness. The queen's apartments, for so long a hub of gentle activity, quiet influence, and dynastic hope, finally fall into a deep and well-earned silence, gathering strength for the dawn that will bring the performance of royalty back to life once more. The last notes of the lute have faded. The final, polite goodnights have been exchanged, their echoes long since absorbed by the heavy tapestries. The great, living machine of the court has finally, mercifully, wound down. A profound quiet settles over the palace, a stillness so deep it feels like a physical presence. The fires in the great hearths, which for hours had roared with life and heat, are now banked for the night. They have become slumbering beasts of ash and ember, their soft, orange glow pulsing faintly in the cavernous darkness, breathing a quiet, steady warmth into the cooling air. The world has been returned to the dominion of shadow. The daylight, the feast, the politics, all feel like a distant dream. All that remains now is the flickering candlelight and the deep, velvet darkness that cradles it. The day's performance is over. It is time to go home. Your journey back to your own small quarters is a slow, solitary walk through a transformed world. The corridors, which during the day were teeming with ambitious courtiers, rustling silks, and urgent whispers, are now utterly empty. They are rivers of silence, vast and echoing. The only sound is the soft, rhythmic scuff of your own slippers on the cold stone floor, a small, human sound that seems impossibly loud in the immense quiet. Each footfall is a soft whisper that travels ahead of you, a lonely announcement of your passage through the sleeping palace. You carry a single candle, its small, brave flame your only guide. Its light throws your own shadow, a tall, distorted giant that dances and flickers on the walls beside you, a silent, dark companion on your journey. The familiar sights of the day are now strange and new in the shifting, uncertain light. The magnificent tapestries, which in the daylight were vibrant scenes of history and myth, are now vast expanses of shadow, their woven figures seeming to shift and writhe just at the edge of your vision. The faces of carved saints and stony gargoyles in the archways seem to watch you as you pass, their expressions hidden in the deep gloom. The air is still and cool, thick with the lingering scent of snuffed-out candles, old beeswax, and the faint, sweet smell of spilled wine from the evening's revels. You pass the great doors of the presence chamber, now closed and silent, the scene of so much anxiety and triumph. You pass the entrance to the great hall, a black maw from which you can still faintly smell the ghosts of the feast, the memory of roasted meat and exotic spices. This walk is a slow unwinding, a journey away from the bright, hot center of power, back towards the quiet solitude of your own small self. As you walk, the day replays itself in your mind, a procession of quiet, vivid memories. You recall the weight of the velvet gown as it was settled on your shoulders in the morning, the feeling of the stays constricting your breath, transforming you into a courtly ideal. You remember the taste of the simple breakfast ale, and the low, dangerous murmur of courtiers discussing the king's latest policy on religion. You can still see the intense, focused expressions of the men playing chess, their silent battle a perfect mirror of the world around them. You see the Queen's face. Serene and composed, as she listened to a petition, her quiet words holding the power to change a family's fortune. You remember the hiss of the poet's whispered verses, the clang of steel from the squire's courtyard, the magnificent, terrifying stoop of the falcon in the open sky. You recall the overwhelming spectacle of the midday feast. The shimmering colors and the complex flavors, and the absolute, reverent silence that fell the moment the king chose to speak. You lived through it all. You navigated the treacherous currents of conversation, you interpreted the silent language of glances and smiles, you performed your duties with grace, and you kept your own counsel. You played your small part in the grand, elaborate theater of the court and have survived another day. It is an exhausting existence, a state of perpetual, draining vigilance, and the relief you feel now is a physical sensation, a loosening of a knot you didn't even realize was tied so tightly in your chest. Finally, you reach the simple, familiar oak door of your own small chamber. It is not a grand entrance, but it is your sanctuary. You push it open and step inside, closing it firmly behind you. The sound of the latch clicking into place is the most comforting sound in the world. It is the sound of a drawbridge being raised, of a fortress gate being barred. In this small room, you are safe. You are no longer a courtier, no longer an observer, no longer a player in the game. You are simply yourself. The bed, with its simple linen sheets and woolen blankets, is waiting. You place your candle on a small table, its light casting a final, gentle glow on the familiar walls of your haven. The sounds of the palace are gone now, replaced by the soft, sighing whistle of the night wind as it finds a crack in the leaded glass of your window. It is a lonely, ancient sound, a lullaby from the world outside. The day, with all its splendor and all its peril, is done. The last ember of your own energy is fading. There are no more lines to remember. No more rivals to assess, no more silent protocols to obey. There is only the stillness of your small room, the gentle darkness, and the promise of rest. Tonight, you lived a quiet life at the heart of power. And now, you sleep.